Welcome to Smartly Uneducated, everybody. I'm your lovely host, Ben. And I'm obviously in here in the studio with...
Me, Evan. Hello.
Yes.
The exhausted. The
Irresponsible.
the DJ.
Reprehensible,
But
but
we have a outstanding guest today, Jack from the Observation Lounge. Very cool stuff that he has to talk about, and very informative about the Tartarian society and the mud floods and how it's all based around a religious idea and things of that nature. And then we get a little into the weeds here at the end of it about aliens and whatnot. So feel free to stick around for the long episode.
oh yeah, without a doubt, it's a great time. So buckle up. Here we go. We're just jumping right in.
Yes, sir. All right, Jack. Thank you so much for joining us today over here at Smartly Uneducated. You are the expert, I would say, about the Tartarian civilization and the mud flood. Is that accurate to say?
Well, I think you might be giving me a little too much credit. Expert is a high class word. I'd say I'm more of an explorer. I like to research and delve into these things, but I'm by no means an expert. I just like to research and share what I've found.
Very cool. So what's your background, and how'd you find yourself being obsessed with the Tartarian civilization?
Sure. So it actually started a few years ago. It's kind of a funny story. I was browsing Reddit and I came across this video that was posted in late 2022. And it was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it was a video of the inside of the Church of St. George in Naples, Italy. And it was a video of a guy swinging this giant mural off the wall. And underneath that mural was another mural, a hidden one of a depiction of St. George and the Dragon. Are you familiar with that symbolism?
I am, yeah. I know that painting very well. I remember that video too being released. So yeah, I've seen you post that a few times as well. It's a fascinating painting. It's a gorgeous and humongous painting too.
Massive. And it totally blew my mind when I saw that. And I remember diving into it and trying to figure out what that meant. I'm like, why would they try to hide this thing behind another painting? Because St. George and the Dragon, as you probably know, it's a symbol that originates from the early Byzantine Empire, and it's been around for a long time. It's actually in the Russian imperial flag. It's in the imperial coat of arms of all these different countries in Europe. And I'm like, why would they try to hide this thing? And it was estimated to date back to the 1500s. And I couldn't find an answer at that time. I was digging and digging and digging. I couldn't find an answer. And I said, you know what? I'm going to have to table this for now. Maybe I'll figure out what this means later on. And it wasn't until about a year later that I started stumbling across the Tartaria stuff, and I realized that that black dragon, or more specifically, it's a black zillant, which is a chimera of a dragon, a griffin, and a wyvern. That zillant is actually the zillant of Tartaria that's being slain by St. George. So it's really a metaphor for the downfall of Tartaria, the slaying of Tartaria by the Christian empires at the time.
Oh, wow. So the flag itself is a symbolism of Russia taking down Tartaria.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a metaphorical depiction of not only Russia and the Muscovites under Ivan III, but also a depiction of the papacy's influence in aiding the Muscovites in destroying the Tartars.
So for the lay person out here, who are the Muscovites in a roundabout way?
Sure. So the Muscovites were basically the predecessor to the Russian Empire, and they had been subjugated by the Tartar Empire, or what we now know today as the Golden Horde. It's total whitewash. We can get into that later on. But they were subjugated by the Tartar Empire in Moscow for almost 250 years, up until the 1480 stand at Ugar River, where Ivan III was able to mobilize the forces necessary to finally cast off the Mongol yoke, or the Tartar yoke by some accounts, and regain their sovereignty over their capital city of Moscow.
That's amazing. Just the implications alone of these people being taken over by the Muscovites is incredibly fascinating in its own right. So who were the Tartarians, and who were what was their span of reign? When were they in power, or their lifespan, if you will?
Sure. So the origins of Tartaria have been a subject of a lot of speculation, but based on the research that I've done and the textual evidence that I've found, the Tartarians were thought to have originated from the descendants of the biblical prophet Noah. So the story goes that Noah had a son named Japhet, and Japhet had a son named Turk. And as a side note, this is where the Turkish people of today are said to have originated their names from. So Turk had a son named, let me grab the actual descendants here. So
That's awesome.
Turk had a son. Yeah, it's super fascinating, and I can point you towards all the citations that I found. It's not in the mainstream King James Bible that Turk was the descendant of Japhet, but it's in more of the early Islamic texts like the Al-Tabari. We also find this in a bunch of different textbooks that were actually distributed to American schools prior to the Rockefellers taking over the public school system in the 1900s. So this was like the Edwin Williams textbook of 1825, the American Annals of Education from 1836, and then the dissertation of Dr. Herman L. Hoa in 1962, all state that the Tartars, at the very least, believe that they descended from the prophet Noah, specifically his son Japhet, then Turk. And then Turk had a son named Taunak Khan. Taunak was succeeded by Jesla Khan, then Dibakai Khan, Kajak Khan, and then finally Alonza Khan. And Alonza Khan had two sons whose names were Tatar and Mughal.
Oh, man.
So when Alonza Khan died, his empire was split between the two brothers, forming the Mongolian and the Tartarian empires, respectively. So when Genghis Khan came along over 1,000 years later, he didn't found the Mongol Empire, actually. He didn't found the Tartar Empire either. He reunited these empires that had already existed for over 1,000 years at this point.
Yeah. Can I add something real fast? So
Sure.
whenever you brought up how it used to be in our school books at one point in time, there was actually something that me and Evan here just deep dived, which was the Skull and Bones Society, or the Order of the Skull and Bones. I'm sure you've heard of that secret society.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the things that they meddled in the late 1800s, when people were really, that was the first time people blew the whistle on them in these old school newspapers and things like that, which you can all look up. It's public information. These like copies of these from like 1890 something or 1880, things like that. But around the 1860s, when the Skull and Bone Society got their hands or all their talons just dug into everything from the education system, the medical lane of our society, the works. One thing that they did is they actually started changing our textbooks, like what children were being taught, what was being public information. And there was a drastic change. That was one of the things that came up on my stuff this past like week when I was looking in the Tartarian, everything with the Tartarian civilization and things of that nature. I had come across where I realized there was a link, between when the Skull and Bone Society took over and had their talons and everything, and they made these changes to the educational books that were available to the public. All of that and many other things were pulled out, and I just noticed that connection in there when you were. It just made me think of it just now when you brought it up. So I was like, hey, that could be another, just a little domino in the line of dominoes in this, in this concept of things being altered and taken away, to where that one of the other reasons we don't know about it as public anymore, because they spoke about it in those textbooks. So it's just like they changed it to where that's all gone. So sorry, I thought that was a little fun fact, a little knowledge nugget to throw in.
Absolutely. I mean, they've skewed it to the point where many historians today deny the existence of Tartaria entirely. They say, oh, it was a blanket term. Cartographers were mistaken. They hadn't explored that region yet, so they just used Tartaria as a blanket term, or Grand Tartary as a blanket term to describe northern Eurasia. But that's a total whitewash, and you're absolutely right with the Skull and Bones, the establishment of the General Education Board. A lot of things changed right around the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century, preceding the Great Wars, World War I and World War II. And you can feel it as a society. I mean, you look back and you just look at the architecture in particular, the buildings that we were creating prior to World War I and World War II, everything radically changed after that Second World War. We completely changed our architectural style. And that is one of the best examples you can see, just hidden in plain sight, of that transition from the old world to the new world.
Well, in your opinion, what would the underlying factor be for them to want to change that, to sort of erase this entire society, civilization off of our radar, off of our education system?
Well, if you can skew the historical narrative to your own advantage, you can not only alter the past, you're actually altering the future through that very same influence. So by rewriting the historical narrative, you can legitimize your own rule. You can diminish the legacy of empires of old. So to answer your question, the reason that they did this, I believe, is to legitimize their own power in this new society that they were attempting to create, this new world order.
Yes, it all goes back to the New World Order, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, if anyone, so one thing I've learned, and then also from researching this leading up to our conversation doing this today, is that if anyone just takes, let's just say, 6 hours out of a week, just for 1 week, isolate 6 hours and actually go and read everything about different civilizations going back thousands of years, you'll notice that, like, in the history of the updates about these civilizations, as historians and archaeologists have found more, throughout, let's say the past 100 years, I've noticed that there is giant random, I call them giant, but I call them like giant facts, just big red flags, because you all of a sudden see, like, because, when in the whole concept of, like, hey, the pen, history is written by whoever the victor is, who's holding the pen at the end of the day. Well, all of a sudden, what we knew about certain things 50 years ago is wildly different in the 70s compared to, or sorry, I say the 70s. That was the 50 years ago. I keep thinking the year is 2000 for some reason in my head. From like the 50s, all of a sudden the 70s, you hear about these other civilizations that they're like, oh, we found out these other things, and then it changes the whole historical perspective because we found remnants, that basically paint a completely different picture than what was taught 20 years prior before that, because everything was written by the, whoever the victor was in that situation. That's all they knew. But then they found these old texts, or maybe old like hieroglyphs or whatever, depending on the civilization, that then changes what the history was that we were aware of into something actually different as it keeps progressing. So the whole Tartarian thing, like, I really wish people would look back into that. If they just took 6 hours out of their week, just one time, they would go, oh, there's that, especially if you apply that, what you learn in it, to the Tartarian concept, it opens a lot of doors of going, hey, maybe I should be a little bit more open-minded about this, because there's obviously something more that we don't know, or was lost, or was taken.
I think they can take less than 6 hours and go watch a 30-minute video over here at the Observation Lounge with Jack and really be able to see for themselves firsthand, right?
For sure. It was just, I was just making the point of, like, people would be in a placement chess-wise in the world where they'll be in a more opportune place to be able to actually learn something that's more accurate than being so closed off and just going off of what is being fed to you, because what's being fed to you most of the time is very altered, or it's very one viewpointed. It's like looking down the barrel of a gun type thing. You're losing all of the peripheral vision. So
Jack,
anyways.
in your research and all of your findings, have you found that the Tartarians were more advanced than our civilization today? Do you believe that?
Well, this is one of the problems with, I think, the Tartarian narrative, and this is something that I've been guilty of doing myself. And as I get further into this research, I realize that we should really start separating the theory of Tartaria from the theory of the Great Reset. So a lot of researchers will clump these together, and oftentimes the critics will use that to discredit the whole thing. They'll say, oh, Tartaria, it's all a psyop. These people believed that there was high technology and this resonant frequency stuff, all of which I believe there's a place for, and it's sort of the more speculative research there. But the problem is these critics will group those two things together and use it to discredit the entire thing, when we can look at just this textual evidence and say, yes, Tartaria was a very real empire, and it did have its legacy ultimately diminished and whitewashed by the powers that be. That doesn't necessarily mean that they possessed high technology in any way, shape, or form. 1 second, I'm getting a knock at the door here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you're good. I'll just turn time over to us real fast. You're
Take
good.
your time.
I want to add something though. So down in South America, there is these chambers. I'm trying to remember what they're called. There are these chambers down there that were built, and a long time ago. We're talking thousands of years. They were discovered, and when you go inside them, they are. And this is public information, by the way. You can YouTube it, you can Google it, whatever. But if you look into these chambers that are in South America, and this is just another weird find, right? It's when you go in there, they're perfectly smooth. They're crafted in a way to where the walls are at just a perfect slight angle. I forgot what degree they're at, and it's basically these resonating chambers. So, you know, and then when archaeologists and engineers have been inside there in the past 30 years, they've openly stated publicly that these things were crafted so precisely in the grounds and the walls, the ceilings, because it's not like a square room like in a house, right? You go in a room, you have 90-degree angles that that create the room at every point that it intersects. This isn't like that. These are the only point in the structure that are in these tunnels in South America are where the floor meets the walls. That's the only 90 and it's a perfect 90 degree. Oh, it's actually not a perfect 90 because when it hits the walls and it goes up, they're at a slight, a modified angle to where it goes and makes this perfectly smooth arch throughout this entire like tunnel. And then there's chambers attached to it. And even the floor, the walls, the ceiling, everything is so precisely smooth that the engineers that have investigated it literally have openly said in every type of publication of it, just saying that, yeah, the only way we could create that with our technology now, but if you're doing it by hand, you would not be able to produce this result. We don't know how that would even be possible because it's so smooth and precise that they're like, that would be some form of technology, whatever. So playing into the whole concept that there's like lost technology out there, I don't believe that there was technology that was more advanced than us now. I think that doing the research, if you go and you look at all these civilizations that obviously got wiped out or lost and things like that over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, I don't think necessarily that there was technology overall that was more advanced than us now. I think it's the concept that whenever a society creates tools and technology and they advance, I think they only advance and create new tools based on what they've discovered at the time. So it's very possible that they discovered something in a particular order different than we discover things now, to where they had different ways of doing stuff. It doesn't mean that their overall technology was more advanced than us. Like, for instance, if we did not discover the engine, right? Create the engine. I'm putting out a narrative for a reason. This is for a reason because you have to change how you look at it. So I'm just saying, if we did not discover the engine, right, and create the motorized vehicle, what if a person discovered a way of creating something different in a different way, right? No, dude, you can do this a million times with the different types of inventions. You can recreate the same thing very similar, just doing it a different way, but with a different type of mechanism. But going off the basis of that mechanism being the forefront of how you build after that, it changes how your technology advances. So they may have been really good at doing X, Y, and Z, but they were horrible doing A through W. You get what I'm saying? So like us now, let's say we created the engine, we started at A, so now we're really good at doing A through P, but now after P to Z, we're really crappy about it. You know what I mean? That's the narrative I'm putting out there.
That's a fair mindset.
It's something to think about. But anyways, it looks like you are back, sir. I'll switch time over to you.
No, sorry about that, fellas. Just to answer Evan's question, I see, if you go back to like the Egyptian civilization, I see a lot of evidence that if you're familiar with Christopher Dunn's pyramid power plant theory, or you're familiar with the work of Jimmy Corsetti or Ben Van Kerkwyk, I think there's a lot of evidence for ancient high technology in ancient Egypt. So I do think that there were civilizations on this planet that were significantly more advanced than we are today. Whether or not the Tartarians possessed this type of high technology, I'm not sure. I found very little textual evidence to suggest that they were capable of harnessing energy from the ether or this sort of atmospheric electricity or used resonant frequency technology, any of that type of stuff. But I do have found significant evidence to suggest that they were capable of building architecture at scale. And that's key because the contemporary narrative not only is that the Tartarian Empire didn't exist, but if they did, or the Mongol Empire existed, were fed this narrative that they were barbaric savages, that they were hordes of barbarians who weren't capable of building anything of lasting value. But we can
Exactly.
look at particular buildings in contemporary Russia and say that building was almost certainly built by the Tartars. Particularly, we can look at Kazansky Station in Moscow. It's got an astrological clock on it and a weather vane of the Tartar Zillant made of solid gold. I mean, the Russians,
Awesome.
the narrative is that the Soviets built this thing in 1940 during the upheavals of World War II. How obvious could you get? I mean, the Soviets hated astrology. They made it illegal. Yet they're going to build a clock tower with zodiac symbols on it that are embedded in solid gold. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah,
and then you look
why would they do that? Why would they make it illegal and then build structures dedicated to it almost?
It's because they didn't build it. They repainted the murals on the inside, and during the upheavals of World War II, they reattributed this to themselves in this effort to homogenize the Russian identity into a single Soviet atheist identity. But they didn't actually build this building, in my opinion. It was very clearly built by the Tartar Empire, which, of course, as we talked about, occupied Moscow for hundreds and hundreds of years prior to the Soviet Union rising to power. So I think that's one of the most blatant examples of historical revisionism, and the reattribution of Tartarian buildings to the Soviets is Kazansky Station in Moscow.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. That is a, oh my God. I don't know how to retort to that. That's a phenomenal claim.
I'm just here
Well, let me
soaking up
ch-
all the information. That's all. I'm enjoying the
Let me
conversation.
pull up. Let me pull up a, if I still have it, a picture of the finial on top of that station, because it could not get more obvious than that. It might take me a minute to find it though.
Oh, you're
Oh,
fine.
absolutely.
You're fine.
So
Just let us know
there
whenever
are-
you're ready, and we'll pull it. We'll bring it up.
There are loads and loads of different maps and just architecture that you have pointed out throughout all of your research that you have posted to your YouTube channel over at the Observation Lounge that have been quite blatantly obvious that the Tartarians have existed in our society and in our time. Have you come across any other sort of civilizations that have been wiped out? Because we know through our research that there was a timeline in the Roman Empire after Charlemagne that was completely erased from history books entirely. So I only ask that because Tartarians apparently were all across the world, right? They spanned the globe.
Mm-hmm. Well, the idea, so that's the one world Tartarians hypothesis, and that's actually something that I don't believe in. I don't think that the Tartarian Empire actually conquered the world, but I do think that there is significant evidence to suggest that they, of course, allied with the Mongol Empire, that they were integrated under the larger Mongol imperial structure. They controlled large swaths of territory in contemporary Russia. They controlled a large swath of territory with the Ottomans under the Ilkhanate in the Middle East. They also established the Yuan dynasty in China. That was Kublai Khan in 1380. And then they attempted to invade Japan multiple times. And the shogunates eventually, well, they were able to fend them off. They never were successful in invading Japan. But there is some evidence that they were blown off course, believe it or not, and ended up in South America and were responsible for founding the Incan Empire, the Empire of Peru, believe it or not. So we do have some evidence that they established there. And there is some evidence that the ancient Tartars may have migrated over the Bering Land Strait in ancient times, and they were part of the lineage of the Native Americans. But I don't think that they conquered the world, so to speak. I actually think a lot of this architecture that we see in America today, some of it may be able to be attributed to the Tartars, but some of it actually may be attributed to Vikings, is what I'm finding as I go further into this research. And we see Valkyrie symbolism embedded into some of these buildings. We see longship symbolism embedded into these buildings. I think what we're looking at is the remnants of a sophisticated but decentralized global civilization where there were multiple different nations and diverse cultures, but they weren't all encompassed under a all-encompassing Tartarian Empire or a one-world Tartarian, so to speak.
That makes me wonder what the next civilization that the Rockefellers and the education system are going to try to wipe off the face of the earth and from history in its own right.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
I think a lot of that is actually the Vikings. The more that I look into this, you guys said you were familiar with my recent exploration into the lineage of George Washington,
Yes.
finding out that he's not actually from Anglo-Saxon roots, that he actually derived from Thorfinn the Dane, who was a direct descendant of King Odin of Asgard. I mean, when I saw that text, it completely blew my mind.
Yeah, that took me through a loop whenever I was looking into stuff about that.
Yeah, and then you find out that the Civil War, there was kind of a war between the Anglo-Saxon democratic North and the more aristocracy, slave-owning South, which were remnants of the Norman Vikings, the Danish Vikings, who established themselves there. So this idea that, you know, when the North conquered the South, they were actually responsible for the whitewashing of this Norman heritage, this Viking heritage, the Anglo-Saxons conquering the Normans in Southern America during the Civil War, and that's what led to a lot of, like, after that, the Civil War, after this conflict, that is what led up to the reattribution of these buildings by groups like the Freemasons leading into the turn of the 20th century.
Oh,
Wow.
Freemason. Talking about just the whole concept, everything you just laid out, everything from the Vikings, the Freemasons. Like there's a lot of things that I've come across, not with necessarily the Tartarian narrative, but with a litany of other things and how where all these different things interact, especially like Freemasonry to Skull and Bones to like historical rewrites, and then even like like the phantom time zone hypothesis, and how these things all interact. If you connect all the dots between all of them and actually lay it out, and you write it down on paper and actually make a organizational chart kind of way to where you can see it physically, to connect the dots mentally in your head, all of a sudden you realize that all these interact with each other. There's all these, like, it basically, imagine circles, and it's like a spectrum, and all of a sudden you see the overlaps happen constantly
The Venn diagram
through all of
right?
them. And now don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean go, oh hey, they're all connected, one massive conspiracy for everything. No, I'm not meaning that. It's just, I think coincidences do happen from time to time, but when there's coincidences that all of them end up being in the same group, covering all of these main areas, and then when you lay it out on timelines, it's just like, I'm kind of questioning a lot of things at this point, my man. Like, this is bothersome to say the least, So it's wildly fascinating. That's all I'm really trying to get at. It creeps me out too. So yeah, it's a great time.
Well, absolutely, and I think I found a picture of that Zillion on Kazansky Station. I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen here for a second. Let's see.
Yeah, let us
we go.
pull this up real quick.
Can you guys see that?
Which one is it? This one right here.
Yeah, we're pulling it up now. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, we got it switched.
So here, I had the full res version of these pictures, but I can't find them on my hard drive right now. But you notice that when I click on this, these are Russian websites, and ever since I got these pictures, I don't know, it might seem kind of crazy, but I cannot load any full resolution pictures of this. Like, this is supposed to be 1,600 pixels or whatever, and it's like super blurry and doesn't even load. And none of these load when I look up the spire of this place. So
if you send me that picture, I'll restore all of it. I'll get it with full resolution.
So what is that symbol that we're looking at? I know it's a golden dragon, but what is it supposed to represent?
Yeah, let me grab that for you.
Is it the Tartarian symbol?
Yeah, so this is from the 1865 American Encyclopedia Flags of All Nations section. You can pull up that whole section, and this is the flag of Tartaria. So you can see that this finial right here is supposed to be a depiction of the Tartarian Zillion.
Holy cow.
Let me grab the actual.
Yeah, if you would like,
full-res image.
I can, that picture, how you're not able to get it up in full res, if for some reason you're still not able to, I can get one pulled up. Not right now. I can make sure it's on the episode, but I can restore it and get it into its full thing without it, ruining the image. I'm pretty good at doing that at this point.
Okay.
So yeah,
that sounds good.
I can do that.
I'll
if you like.
I'll pull together a zip file of a bunch of my images too. So if you guys want to use those as reference, I'll email those to you guys later on. But
Very
that's
cool.
much appreciated.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And there's one more image I want to show here.
Please.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got so much stuff. I really got to organize my
So do
my
we.
stuff
It's
here.
okay.
Okay, while you're pulling that up, Evan, do you have any kind of thoughts or anything like that that are going through your head at the moment?
I mean, always the underlying factor that we're being completely subjected to a sort of force-fed reality of our history and our world history alone is a horrifying mindset that they don't want us to know what really happens. They want us to be force-fed, to be happy, to be moving on. It's just that new world order that we keep being harped back onto over here at Smartly Uneducated. We keep seeing more and more evidence that the Rockefellers, BlackRock, Vanguard, all these different groups are trying to change our history so that we are unable to think for ourselves. But thanks to Jack over here, we are able to see into our past a little bit better through his eyes and through his deep dive investigating into the Tartarian civilization.
Yeah.
Which makes me a more of an educated individual in its own right. Forever grateful for that. The onset of them wanting to put the Tartarian dragon, the Zelant golden dragon, back onto the Kazansky railroad station is. I don't even know what that implication means.
I don't know either.
They find it. They take it down after they defeat the Tartarians, and then they put it back. Why would they want to do that?
Make it seem like they came up with it.
Yeah, this is our idea. Look at our cool dragon.
Look at our cool dragon.
You can.
Well, a lot of this.
Stop watching his stream.
I'm not.
Okay.
So a lot of this is actually, the finials on top of these structures were replaced by the Soviet Star during the upheavals of World War II. So it used to be, a lot of them actually used to be the twin-headed dragon. And we see these, are you familiar with that? The twin-headed eagle, I should say. Are you familiar with that symbol?
Mm-mm.
All right, let me share my screen again.
All right.
I love
Sounds
it.
good. Sounds good to me.
So this is what we're here for.
So if you guys are seeing here, this is the 1865 Flags of All Nations section. This is of the American Encyclopedia, and you can see, of course, they have China and Tartary up here.
Holy shit.
And Tartary is that black dragon with the curly tail. And it's the same one that we see on Kazansky Station here that's mounted on top. So, and then there's some other in Kazan, the city of Kazan in Russia. There's a few statues that also are depicting that same Zealand. So very interesting. And then
I like the pirate
let's
flag.
see.
Me too.
We have other flag charts. Yeah.
That evidence alone is damning to say, hey, they existed. Yeah.
All right, so
you can't fake that.
I'm almost done. I went and hunted down that image of that golden dragon,
Ooh, what are you pulling up now?
and I almost got it almost depixelated. So I'm about to have that public for you to be able, for everyone to see here shortly.
Oh, nice.
Sorry, I've been hunting it down this whole time and modifying it, trying to get it to get rid of the bad resolution.
Yeah, it can be a hard thing to find right now for whatever reason. But then we also have, like, if you notice that symbol, and then you see on the Russian imperial flag, we have that Zealand being slain by St. George on the Russian imperial flag. And this is Dutchman Karel Allard. He was a 17th century researcher. He traveled to the city of Kazan, and he said that this flag was flying over the Khan's palace in Kazan, because actually Tartaria was considered a nation within the greater empire of Russia until the Bolshevik Revolution and the Soviet Union took over and whitewashed it all.
Would you mind sharing that image if you have it up?
Which image?
The flag that you were just.
I think he was
the Bolshevik one.
I think it's one of those on there, right?
So this is Dutchman Karel Allard's depiction of when he visited Kazan, the city of Kazan, in the 18th century. This is how he drew the flag that was flying over the Khan's palace in that city.
Is it what's on your stream right now?
We're still looking at the China, Tartary, Cochin, China, the flags of the.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, you know what? I think I'm sharing the wrong thing here. Let me share my other screen.
You're perfectly
Oh,
fine.
yeah.
Where I wasn't sharing the full screen. I was just sharing the app. Here we go. There we go.
There we go.
Outstanding.
There we go.
is.
So this is the drawing that Carol Allard drew again over the Khan's palace in Kazan until the Soviet Union took over and whitewashed everything. And then we can see the Russian imperial flag here, which is currently used to this day. If you watch this interview with Tucker Carlson, Putin and Tucker Carlson, this Putin is still putting this flag right in the background of his interviews. I don't know if it's an intentional jab at global leaders saying, "Hey, we know the truth," or if he's just displaying it to out of arrogance, saying, "Yeah, we still took down Tartaria. Here we go." But you could see right here, this is the symbol of St. George slaying the Zillan of Tartaria right there.
That
and
is
then, of course,
wild that he is still showing this off today.
yeah, it's almost like a middle finger to
absolutely
everybody. Either I can't really tell. I don't know if he's doing it to try to as kind of a subliminal message to other global leaders saying, "Hey, I'm going to, release the documents, the Tartaria archives," as people always talk about, like Putin's going to release the Tartaria archives, or if he's just displaying it out of arrogance, saying, "Yeah, we took down Tartaria. What are you going to do about it?" But you can also see other symbolism here. We have the twin-headed eagle, and this was actually on the finials of many of the Kremlin complex in Moscow, which has been replaced by the Soviet Star during World War II. And this twin-headed eagle was originally a symbol of the Byzantine Empire, which I would argue the Byzantine Empire was rebirthed through the Russian Empire after their fall at Constantinople in 1452. So we can get all into that as well when we talk about sort of the downfall of Tartaria, how this empire was ultimately destroyed and whitewashed from history. We can talk all about that in a bit here.
Yeah, the fact that this man is still blatantly showing off this logo and this symbol, it's got to be some sort of like showcase of power, some middle finger to the rest of the powers of the world, saying, "Hey, if they do any sort of research into our logo, they're gonna find out really quick that we did kill the Tartarians. We took them down." Yeah. Oh my God, Jack, this is absolutely Putin's showcase of power, saying this is what we've done in our history. How dare you think that we are anything less?
Yeah, I mean, it's plain as day. I mean, this is clearly the Zillan of Tartaria being slain by St. George, and Putin's displaying it. And then also, again, this all ties into the Byzantines being the Byzantine Empire being rebirthed through the Russian Empire with the 1480 stand at Ugra and the Muscovites, as we talked about before. Because Ivan III was actually married to a niece of the last Byzantine emperor. He married the princess to the Byzantine throne in 1450, just 30 years prior to the 1480 stand at Ugra, where the Muscovites were suddenly able to mobilize the forces they needed to cast off the Mongol yoke. Well, how did they do that after 250 years of occupation by the Tartar Empire? Well, that goes back to the Council of Florence in 1430 and this reunification of the Eastern and the Western churches. And, even though Constantinople still fell in 1452, this marital connection between Sophia Pelagonia of the Byzantine Empire and Ivan III of the soon-to-be Russian Empire, it's plain as day. This was a rebirth of papal authority through the Russian Empire, killing the Tartarians and ultimately conquering them.
Wow, and that's history most Americans and most humans in today's world don't know about unless they are a dedicated Russian enthusiast historian. I
think even then, I don't think you're told the complete story about that. I think you're told that there were barbarian tribes that were holding control of Moscow until 1480, the Golden Horde, so to speak. And they say that this symbol is just a depiction of Christianity triumphing over paganism. That's what we hear today. Oh, it's just good versus evil, Christianity triumphing over paganism. That's what the symbol of St. George and the Dragon really means. Well, that's only really a half truth, because the Tartarian Empire, they were largely Mohammedan, they were Muslim, Islamic, but they were also largely pagan. So
yeah,
and we can talk more about the astrology aspect of it as well.
We definitely should.
Yeah, I've got that golden dragon. If you go and look at, we just shared it over the stream.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to see it.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay.
I was able to
Yeah, thanks for
restore it for the
restoring that.
most part. There is some areas that I couldn't get it to fully restore properly, so I
Mhm.
didn't waste my time with it. But this is a much more clear as day image. Let me make sure I'm showing it on our recording sites for any viewer to see real
Mhm.
fast.
And do you know why they would choose gold instead of their traditional black logo for the dragon?
Could you clarify that?
Well, because they're using a gold statue here for the dragon symbol, where on their flags they're using a black dragon, and in all their other depictions that I'm seeing.
Well, I think it's we see a lot of these spires and finials being made out of gold, so I think that it was just a display, a showcase of their power
Gotcha,
um,
gotcha.
to create something out of solid gold. Also, gold doesn't deteriorate the same way that other metals do. So
It's just a
who
nice
knows?
touch to have on a spire, huh? Just another beautiful symbol, I suppose.
Yeah, and also if you subscribe to the idea that these spires collected atmospheric electricity or were some type of conductor,
And I do.
gold's a great conductor of electricity as well. So it's possible that that could have been the reason for it as well.
I love that. I love that so much.
Hmm.
I
I'm gonna have to manually put it in for viewers to see that golden dragon because for some reason it's just popping up a black square on our side when I try to put it to where everyone can see it,
Mhm.
which is very very odd.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
well,
That's
actually,
fine. Let me show this video that I was talking about before of
please.
the mural in the Church of St. George in Naples. Am I still streaming here?
let me
Yeah, we gotta
pull
pull
it
it up.
up.
Just give us
Yeah,
1 second.
second. Let me get
Okay.
that going. There we
There you
go.
go. You go ahead and reset that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, there it is. So this is in the Church of St. George in Naples, Italy. It was rediscovered in late 2022 by renovation crews who were doing work on the church, and they realized, oh my God, there's a giant mural behind this painting. So this, for me, was when the cat
Holy
really came
cow.
out of the bag, and when things started really ramping up in this research, because I didn't even know about that there was any conspiracy behind the St. George and the dragon symbol until I saw this, and I was like, there's got to be something behind this. There's got to be a reason why they hid this mural. And again, I couldn't figure it out for like a year until I started stumbling across these flag charts, these maps that describe Tartaria and have this black dragon, this Zillant right here. You can see it's often depicted with this curly tail, almost always depicted with the distinct tail curl here. This is plain as day, the Zillant of Tartary.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
And to cover it up, do you know what they covered it up with?
I haven't actually done a lot of research into what this mural was, this one that they covered it up with, but that'd be an interesting exploration as well.
'Cause I wonder if it would be a sort of just
Oh,
a painting of Russia's victorious sort of mindset.
hey, could you move the video to where it shows the painting getting opened more? Because they're there in the bottom left-hand corner. You see how there's like that stone in there? I'm trying to see if that's actual like just old stone crumbled up, or if there's like imprintations put on it, like how like
words?
small type of hieroglyphs or small type of text or symbols. I was just
Oh yeah.
curious if there's anything that if it's possible to see it. I know that you're limited on what the video is, but there in the bottom, I mean, it looks like it's just like compacted type of concrete of some form. I say concrete, but you know what I mean. I
Right.
was just curious about that because it's in that
Well,
space. Yeah, it's really weird. Obviously, it's probably not. There's no symbols or anything. At least I can tell. But there for a second, whenever it opens in the bottom left hand corner, it kind of looked like maybe there's something written.
Mhm.
I found
But
I found a
it's
high
hard to see.
resolution image of it. It is just stone. It's just stone, like plaster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I
all
think it's
set.
just plaster, but what's fascinating about this is that it's in Naples, Italy, because you wouldn't normally expect to see this symbol. Like, again, it's on the Russian imperial flag. Why is the St. George and the dragon symbol in Italy? Well, it's because the papacy, which is, of course, located in Italy, was allying with the Russians in their effort to overthrow the Tartar Empire.
Hmm.
So
Apparently,
this Saint George is a hero not only in Catholic mythology but also in the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church. So it was kind of a merging, an unholy alliance, ironically, between the Papal States and the Russian Orthodox Church in order to overthrow this widely Muslim pagan empire of Tartaria.
That's fascinating.
I would be remiss, Jake, if I didn't ask you about the mud flood theory.
Yeah, I had come across that as well.
To completely do a little twist here, a little 180. The mud flood theory. Every time you do any sort of tertiary research about Tartaria, everything talks about our world being covered in mud, and that people have been digging it up with their steam shovel engines and things of that nature. Do you have any insight?
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of these old pictures and you see buildings, like particularly Kansas City. There's several images that are kind of make you scratch your head. You're like, this looks like this is being dug out of the ground, like these old buildings. And a lot of examples, they have uncovered old Greco-Roman style structures that are hidden beneath our feet.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but there's these tunnel systems that are being discovered. And you find out a lot of these buildings have a much lower level to them. You walk around cities and you see that windows that look like they've been filled in that are also underneath the ground. So there's a lot of ideas and speculation behind that.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but there's actually something I want to add to what we're talking about right now. Basically, years ago, I used to live in Colorado, and I had friends who were in the military there that I became friends with, and two of them I was really close friends with for several years. They used to like literally stay the night at my apartment every weekend, so they didn't have to live in the barracks. And one of them had at one point in time, his role was that he was basically running security at NORAD, or at least where NORAD used to be, in Cheyenne Mountain. NORAD is still there, just for conversation's sake. It is still there. It's just they've tried to repurpose it to the public eye, even though we already know what they still do there. But he was saying that he said NORAD always creeped him out because when he was there and they would go into these, the access points to go inside NORAD, he said there are sections in NORAD that you have to walk through that aren't even like concrete walls or anything like that. You're basically walking through an old tunnel. Like we're talking about like dug out, and it's still got rock and dirt, on the walls and things like that. But obviously there's like, he said there would be like braces. But the reason I bring it up is because he was saying that there is certain areas in NORAD that they would keep off limits and not let people go into, even the military there, like certain military personnel. But you could see it from a distance, and he told me that some of it there, it looked like there was like basically like the pillars, and the way he was trying to describe it, I was like, wait, you talking about like pillars at the White House type thing? And he was like the big stone or the cylinder shaped pillars that are out front. And he was just like, he's like, yeah, just like that. And those like monument buildings that we have in DC, but he said that they were like embedded into the rock, like as if they were being uncovered, not like they were being carved out. They were just there, like they discovered it. And so, because he knew I was, I'm Greek. And so he was just like, that's why he even brought it up, because we were talking about like Greek and, Greek architecture one night. And he was just like, told me about it. He was just like, I wonder if there was influence from like Greeks at one point. He's like, wonder if like things have, over the years, like where people have actually been and societies used to actually be, it made him wonder. And just going through this conversation, it just made me think of that just now, because you were talking about like the mud floods and, looking at places like Kansas City and things like that. It just popped into my head. So I don't know how much truth there is to it, just because this was like a secondhand account and he was just telling me about it. I've never been there. I've never seen it. But it just makes me wonder if there was something more that, like, because that's over there in Colorado, that's in the mountains,
Well, Chicago is another great example, is one of the best examples of there being underground tunnel systems underneath our feet. And these ones are actually well known about, but they tell us, oh, most of them were made for bootlegging booze during the Prohibition era. You're like, really? They did this during the 10 years that booze was illegal? And it was like built by these Italian gangsters. Yeah, they built these tunnels. And then you look at the tunnels, and it's like perfect masonry work, like these giant tunnels underground, and there's got like trams going through them. You're like, something's not adding up here. So
that's a lot.
I don't know what
accomplish in a wildly short amount of time.
They really wanted their booze.
Exactly. And one of the creepiest examples of stuff being hidden underneath our feet is the catacombs. And
Yes.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with my lunch breaks work, but he did an amazing series of videos on the catacombs underneath a lot of these old world churches and cathedrals. And one thing that I've never been down into the catacombs. I visited Italy. I was never interested in going down and seeing a bunch of dead bodies, but I was always thinking, oh, this is just like overflow for, during the plague and stuff. They just like toss bodies underground because they ran out of space in the cemeteries. But then you find out, no, all of the bones are stacked in geometric patterns underneath the church. It's like it was a very deliberate thing. And you look at all the patterns that they stack these things with, it's very deliberate. And you're like, what is going on here? And I don't have an answer to tell you one way or the other what they were actually doing. But I always was thinking that it was just like an overflow cemetery. They're just like throwing bodies down there. But then you find out that it actually was much creepier and darker than that. And a lot of these churches, I believe, have catacombs underneath them. I was just in Manhattan in New York City, and I was in the St. Patrick's Cathedral there.
Yep.
And I was talking to my lunch break because him and I go back and forth sometimes about some of this stuff. And he made a video where he went into St. Pat's and he asked one of the guys, "Hey, is there a basement to this building?" And the guy's like, "No, there's no basement." And then I go there, and they had another part opened up to it. Then when he was there, you could actually go into the back. And I'm looking at the pediment in the back, and then underneath it, there's these stairs, and they feed down into a basement system. So the guy who told him that there was no basement was lying. And then I asked one of the guys there, "Hey, is the public allowed to go down the basement?" And he just looked at me weird. He's like, "No, you're not allowed to go down there." So, and then of course I walk out of that building, and what do you know? There's military police with,
No
I'm not sure if you've ever
way.
been to the Vatican, but there's like, the guys with assault rifles standing right outside, and they didn't look threatening or anything. I don't think that there
They
was
just had
any
their post.
I think it was just a coincidence, but it was kind of weird that I walked in there was no military police, and then after I asked the guy about the tunnel system, I walk out of there, there's a bunch of guys with assault rifles.
Well,
But
that's not the first time something like that has happened in areas like that where they keep it very closed off from the public. There have been many times there have been archaeologists who are given permission to go to like the Vatican and things like that. And they talk about this in interviews where they have said that like, yeah, it was really weird. Literally the same exact narrative that you're describing right now, where they openly said like, yeah, I asked if I could go down in this area. Is that some place I have access to? Because they were just checking out all of the archives because they were given access because they were one of the few that were chosen because the Vatican is very, very strict about who can go and look at what. And there's a certain, and plus there's also areas that no archaeologist outside of the Vatican is allowed to ever go look at. So
yeah.
when the moment, there is numerous videos of different select archaeologists and historians that were allowed to go and see certain things. And when they asked, they just inquired. That's it. They vocally just asked, like, "Hey, can I go and look at this?" All of a sudden, there was armed personnel that just appeared out of nowhere, blocking everything that would have, if they were allowed access, that's the way you would have to go. All of a sudden, they were there. And they were never there before. It was just like all of a sudden they walk out of one room and go to the next. And like, oh shit!
Oh man, that creeps me out. that creeps me out, Ben.
Oh no, that's
man,
it's
just
on
think about it.
YouTube. You can literally just look up. Actually, I think the best way to find these videos is just Google, historians and archaeologists who are allowed to go to the Vatican, and then go to YouTube and just start searching their names one by one, and all of a sudden you'll see the videos start popping up. Within the first like 10 videos in the what populates, and all of a sudden, boom, there's the interview where they openly state it. Like they're like, yeah, all of a sudden there's military people, and then they were never allowed back again. They've never been allowed access again to even go to Vatican.
I'll say this: if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was a betting man, I would bet that there are catacombs underneath St. Patrick's in New York City.
Yeah,
100%.
Oh, without a doubt. I
with you.
completely
I'm with you on
agree.
that.
I completely agree because we already know one of the big reveals that just happened recently, and this is on a light side of things. Look what happened with the Jewish community with the tunnels that the public found out about because they were all using
yeah.
them to sneak around New York
That was
City.
wild.
Yeah,
It
and
was.
no one, not even the blueprints of the building, even had them on there. And all of a sudden they're there,
Mhm.
and they've been there since forever. So it's like, okay, if that's at the surface value, so you're gonna sit here, like someone's gonna sit there and tell me to the public eye that there's no other form of tunnels that and structures that are farther below the surface.
And
Like,
there were sinkholes of concrete roads that have collapsed to
yeah,
find an underneath Chicago entire network of tunnels and roadways.
yeah,
So
Mhm. Mhm.
that sort of leads back to the mud flow theory, to where things have been covered up, right? Things have been literally covered up by a massive storm.
hell, just look at California, the archaeological finds that have happened, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it does by proxy, just because look what they've been discovering in over there between the prehistoric mammoths to finding human remains way deep down in the ground and how they're finding uh the human remains, which are basically fully intact, but how they're laying in these containers in the ground is like they're in a geometrical shape. That is a fact.
I wonder if
You
they
can
have.
look at
I wonder if they
people can
have.
look it up. It's there.
I wonder if they've lied to us about how deep our crust of the Earth actually is, about the depth that we have traveled.
I think. Well, we already know. I think it depends on the area you dig in, because you could be in a place that has limestone,
Of course.
and it's a pain in the butt to dig through that. You could be in a place that has bedrock that's like extremely dense, that causes machinery failures and problems of digging through that. Things get too hot, melts the tools that they're using, the heads of the equipment,
Then just
things
loose
of that
dirt.
and just loose dirt. Like, so there's like different things, but we already know of one tunnel that they dug. It's all public now. That's why Russia, it's all quarantined over there. That is, they couldn't hide that. They dug that tunnel. Now there's a lot of conspiracy around that tunnel,
How
or the
was that?
hole they dug. It's basically, they call it the gateway to hell, is what they call it, because
Oh, that's right.
yeah, they dug this hole that goes all like way. It's like supposedly the deepest hole ever dug, which I don't buy. But I think it may be the deepest hole in Russia they ever did in this area. But basically, the temperature skyrocketed, which of course, the closer you go, if our understanding of the public geography that they state with, and it comes to the core, the mantle, all these things, yeah, the temperature would go up because you're getting close to hot, to magma and lava and all these different things, and gases, which gases produce their own temperature as well. But the thing is that when they lowered a camera and a mic, obviously the camera couldn't see anything, but the microphone, you hear people screaming and stuff like that once you get farther down, which that can be easily debunked, and not saying, oh, that's not hell. That's just ambient noise inside this tiny hole that they dug going straight down. I mean, you've got all this resonating sounds that happen, blah blah blah. But the thing is that why would they quarantine that whole area off? That's the real question. And it's especially if it's a hole that's this big around. It's not like it's a hole that you could fall into. So it's like, why are you quarantining that area? Like, and it's a massive area they quarantine in there in Russia, and they won't there's no information about it anymore. You can't see anything after what has leaked out other than that. And this all took place in like the 80s and 90s. I think the 90s was
Well,
the last time anything came out about it. But anyways,
another example is the Hall of Records in Mount Rushmore. They say that, I mean, that's completely off limits, but they say that, oh, it was a side project of Gutzon Borglum, who was the head sculptor of Mount Rushmore, and he ran out of money, so he never finished it. But then you look at the pictures of this thing, and it looks like it was just filled in with rubble or something, and it's totally off limits. You can't go to it. So, again, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I bet you if you were to excavate that, you'd find a whole lot more than what you bargained for.
well, that's why it makes me wonder about the whole what was it? What my buddy told me, who was in the military there, who used to be at, he went to NORAD many times, and he was saying that how they found, he got to see them from a distance, but he said it was clear as day. You could see partial pieces of pillars sticking out from the rock that they have been carving out in these cut off areas, and at the base you can see the platforms that it sit on. Like, they unearthed the platform, which is exact. He said it's exactly just like you see these pillars at these monument buildings and things like that. He said they weren't building it. Obviously, you could tell they found it. And he's like, and that's what made me become a really big conspiracy theorist. That's literally what he told me. He was like, that opened the door for me to wonder about things, because he's like, how are they finding that there? Why is that there? That's inside of a mountain. It's not like at the top of a mountain. It's inside the mountain, like a ways. So it's like, what else is how did it get there? A whole bunch of things come up. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm if I wasn't, if I was a betting man, I'd be wondering some things right now.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I for one,
When we getting that on DraftKings?
yeah, exactly.
Are there catacombs underneath St. Patrick's? I'll put $1 million on it if I had $1 million. I don't, but
I think there is. I think there is without a doubt. Especially just the whole New York City area. That is one of our original places that, as a country, like that's where we came in. That's where everything started, was in that area. So it's like, yeah, I bet you anything ever since this, when we came over here, the whole Columbus thing, blah, 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 and things, we had the colonies, the 13 colonies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you anything that they probably came across things, and over the years, it just got buried away. And then, whether it was intentional because of a conspiracy or not, it doesn't really matter at that point. Obviously, there is more going on that people are not aware of, and either whether or not there's a something, a narrative out there to cover these things up or not, it doesn't matter. It's the evidence is there. There's enough circumstantial evidence to say, hey, there's obviously more that's within these areas, and this would be worth investigating. But for some reason, everything's cut off. Nowadays. So it's just really weird. It bothers me actually a lot that this is just being just kind of like in a weird way swept under the rug, overall. And I don't know, it just bothers the shit out of me at this point.
Are you familiar with the idea that the Statue of Liberty was actually Lucifer the Torchbearer?
What?
I have heard of that. Yes, I have heard of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So, and then the chain that is being broken at its foot is actually the chain that in Revelation 20, where the angel came down and chained Satan for 1,000 years. That's the whole Satan's little season millennial reign theory, and that's something I've dove into a little bit. It's basically the idea that for 1,000 years after Christ came.
Mm-hmm.
to Earth, in 0 AD, for those 1,000 years that we refer to as the Dark Ages, this was actually his millennial reign, as foretold in Revelation 20, and we're currently living in Satan's little season, in the little season where, because in Revelation 20 it says that after Christ's millennial reign, Satan has to be loose for a little while before God ends up returning and destroying Satan for all time.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of an idea that I've been looking into recently. I don't know if it has any merit to it, but I think it kind of makes sense, this idea that these so-called dark ages that we talk about may have actually been more enlightened than we give them credit for. And then the Statue of Liberty in particular, it does bear a pretty striking similarity to some of the paintings, the depictions of Lucifer the Torchbearer, and that shackle that's being broken. We're told that that's I think the shackle of slavery or something. It's America casting off its chain from England or whatever, but it may actually be more to the story than that.
Yeah, I'll be very honest. Like over the years, ever since I would say once my mind kind of really opened the door, and I started to instinctively look into things as if it's like a conspiracy mindset, you could say. When I would say I was probably around 14 or 13 years old, and whenever that happened, like I'll be very honest, like myself, I am not a Christian. Like I just don't really buy into any kind of dogma that there is. And that's just my personal opinion. It doesn't mean I'm right. I could be completely wrong, but I've never bought into any of that, right? But over the years, since I was about 14 years old, give or take, to now, me being in my mid 30s, it's just like everything I've come across when it comes to these weird tie-ins with different stories in the Bible to other narratives of that form, because there's many other things out there where you can take stories of the Bible and things of that nature and kind of cross it over into a lot of different things now that, where information has come to light. And I've never been someone, when I see that, I go, oh, that must mean that everything in the Bible is true. in the dogma sense. I've never been someone like me now. I don't connect it that way, but I do see that the Bible itself was written by people over the years, and it's just going off of what they witnessed, of their understanding of what they knew at that time. So it's like there is some truth. Obviously, there's enough evidence there to say that there is some circumstantial truth to these things that they witnessed, whether or not they were accurately portrayed in the writings, because we're talking about people who used to write with poop on the wall. So I mean, not saying that their interpretation is 100% word of law, but the overall account, there's obviously some truth in there to some of these stories of things they witnessed. So, like, for instance, like even evidence of like a great flood that happened, which would then play into mud floods.
Yeah.
Because if there's a massive flood around the earth, of some nature, well, one thing that comes exactly with it is a bunch of mud, because all that sediment gets moved. So it's just like,
Ties in with the flood of Noah,
yeah, exactly. And it's really weird how all that plays into everything. But one thing that does bother me is I feel like a lot of people get cut off when it comes to because they allow themselves to restrict their brain and how they interpret
tunnel vision.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get that tunnel vision
Yeah.
going because, like, let's say they're a devout Christian or whatever faith they have, they become very biased. Or let's say someone is a hardcore atheist, right? I'm not a hardcore atheist. I'm just someone who just doesn't. I just don't personally believe in it. Doesn't mean I'm against any litany of things. But there are people out there who don't believe in anything, who are hardcore atheists, and they go off of the word of law of what someone put in a science textbook, which then gives them tunnel vision. So then they have these blinders on, and everyone's doing on both sides of every part of the spectrum overall. And so it's just like, it's really weird, and it bothers me a lot, because even the people who are supposed to be held in high regard of, let's say, their education, things like that, and they know their stuff, well, they're also very blindsided by a lot of things. They're very biased. So it's just, I feel like I don't know how else to put it. It's just, it's really frustrating talking about this in a weird way. Like I find myself, like, right now, I'm getting frustrated talking about it, because it's like, there's so much biasness going across every single category on everyone on both sides, any form of perspective, that it's just like, how is there a way to resolve it to where we can actually get to the truth of something? You know what I mean? I feel like, I hope I landed the plane on that.
No, absolutely. Because the problem is that I see, Ben, is that people like order. They don't like being confused. They don't embrace the confusion of the chaos of our history or of our life or of any topic. They want order. They want a black or white answer. They want to, be a Republican, or they want to be a Democrat. They want to be right. They want to see something as right or something else as wrong. They don't like being confused. It allows no room for nuance at all. Yeah. So I made a video just the other day talking about how there's a lot of astrological symbolism in the Bible, and talking about how, like, there's passages in Luke and Mark where there's Aquarius symbolism in there, that Jesus says, go find the man carrying the jar of water and wait for me there. He's saying, wait for me at Aquarius. There's all this Pisces symbolism in the Bible too, Jesus talking about the two fish. But I get a lot of these religious zealots in my comment section who are, telling me that I'm a blasphemer or that I'm a heretic because I'm even daring to suggest that there's another interpretation of these texts. And so it just goes to show you that a lot of people, and again, it goes along with the idea that the victors write the history books. When we look back at some of these wars, right? When we look back at, for instance, World War II or the Civil War, we like to think that there's a victor and a loser, there's right versus wrong, and that the good guy won every time. But there's no room for nuance in that conversation whatsoever, or else you're labeled as, either an anti-Semite, or you're labeled as a racist because you question that, maybe there's more to the Civil War than just like freedom versus slavery. I'm not saying that stuff wasn't a big part of it. I'm not denying any of the very real stuff that happened during those conflicts. But there's more to the story oftentimes. Like, for instance, in World War II, nobody really talks about how the U.S. allied with the communist Russians in order to essentially win the war. And Russia turned around and did arguably worse things than the Germans did during the war.
Oh,
We
yeah.
got into the war to protect Poland, right? Or part of the reason was to protect Poland's sovereignty, and then we just allowed Russia, the Soviet Union, to destroy Poland and all these other terrible things. The
Oh, yeah.
genocide of the Tartars, the whitewashing of Tartar history. I want to talk about national cultural development under communism. Are you guys familiar with that document, the June 1957 CIA declassification?
Yes,
I am
I
not.
don't know it super well, but I have seen it. I've glanced over it, but it's been like, oh shoot, at least 2 years
I am
since
not
I've seen
familiar
it.
by any means. No.
Yeah.
So it's a document that was published in June 1957 and it was immediately classified by the Central Intelligence Agency. And it was talking about how the Soviet Union during World War II, they sent troops around covertly to every Muslim province within the USSR to burn the libraries of the Tartar people, rewrite their history, and eliminate any references to the Great Russian aggressions. So it's essentially talking about how, I'll just pull it up here so we can
That's
look at it for a second.
amazing.
And to just while you're pulling
Dude.
that up, I want to throw something out there, and this has to do. It's very relevant to today, because I've been having this conversation with my oldest daughter over the past, I would say, year, because she learned about World War II and all these things. She's now a freshman in high school this year, and her understanding of World War II was so restricted that I was like, what? Wait, what? Because I was hearing the things she was saying, and I was just like, because she was talking about how we were the reason, like how America was the reason why World War II ended. We came in like saints, basically, and did all this. She knew really almost nothing about the Holocaust. She knew the term, but she knew nothing about the horrible genocides that took place. The education system now is pushing, has altered since I was a child the truth of World War II. When I was a kid, we were taught, for the most part, of the overall truth, right? Where, we ended up doing the whole concept, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's how we were allies with the Russians in World War II. We weren't allies with them because we were buddies. Nope. It was like, no, man, there's a bigger threat going on. We all got to band together to knock this thing out. We can go back to killing each other and hating each other afterwards. But for now, we got to stop this other horrible threat, which is basically what happened. But my daughter had no idea of the horrible atrocities that Russia was doing during World War II. Had no
They
idea.
killed more people than the Germans. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. And it was their own people too. Like the things they did to their own civilians, who they forced into war. Like I had to walk her through it. We have had many conversations over the past year where I have literally gone online and sat her down and literally pulled up actual history and pulled it up and educated her on it. And I was like, I don't know what the school's teaching you, and there's nothing I can do to change that. But what I can do is I can at least show you the truth. And then I had to lay it all out and
Sounds
everything.
like
'cause
we
she-
got a new episode we got to do here soon.
well, because she also had sorry, and I'll stop my little rant here in about 60 seconds. But
no, I love it.
she
Keep going.
also had this idea in her head that the country of Japan were all innocent, and that we nuked them for no reason, basically, is what she was being taught in school, and how it was a good thing that we apologized to Japan. And I had to set her straight on that. And I was like, listen, I'm not saying nuking people is good. Killing anyone's bad. But you have to
But here's
understand the
what they did at
circumstances.
Renan King.
Yeah. I
yes,
was like, let me
exactly.
lay this out for you, because I had to explain how their government was broken. It was destroyed. It was shattered like shattered glass. And there was all these different factions of the government at the time in Japan. And I had to explain all that. And I said, listen, all of them were bad. There was only maybe one faction of the government in Japan, or their version of a government, that was one tiny faction that was not as bad as the rest. I was like, but overall, they were all doing horrible things. I was like, yeah, innocent people died. But I was like, but that's the cost of war. That's why we shouldn't go to war if we can help it. I had to explain all this, and then I explained why a nuclear bomb even happened over there. I was just like, it was the only place we could get to without getting shot down before it could even get dropped. You couldn't just go over Europe. You couldn't just fly over these other areas. That plane would not make it. Plain and simple. I was like, you have to remember what the technology was. And I showed her what modern stealth planes look like, and I had to show her what we had working with back then. I was like, we were behind in technology compared to these other countries on the military front, and I had to explain it all. And then, the last little bit was just the fact that she thought that we, nuked the wrong people, and had to literally walk her through what these different factions of the Japanese government were doing and what their line of focus was across World War II in that war. I was like, we didn't nuke the wrong people, sweetie. I'm not saying what we did is we should be like, hoo, hooray, we killed a bunch of people. No, I'm not saying that, but you have to remember what the cost I had to lay it all out, like in way more detail, and I'm not going to do that now. But yeah, it was wild, the fact that she was being taught, and I had to also teach her actually in depthly about the Holocaust. I made her watch Boy in the Striped Pajamas or whatever.
Good.
Ooh, that's a dark one.
I made her
hard
watch it
movie to watch.
because the fact that she was so naive and they weren't teaching her anything about the Holocaust, I was like, here, we got a movie to watch. It's probably a little bit too old for you, but at this point, I don't think anything's too old for you from what's going around on social media. So let's go watch this.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, I'll digress and take the time back over to you. So because I know you were sharing a deal for us.
Oh yeah, I just I shared a screenshot. I don't know if you are able to pull it up here.
I'm not
but it's
seeing it
It's
on
in the
this.
Discord general chat.
Oh, my bad. Let me jump over to that real quick.
I believe it is, at least. Yeah. No, it is not.
I am not seeing it.
Okay.
Not seeing it whatsoever.
How can I get this to you guys? Let's see. I'm gonna
Yeah.
put in the. Oh, I can put in the general chat here.
I apologize for my World War II rant about things, but I'm a huge World War II buff.
Well,
I love history on that.
I see it less of a rant, more of along the lines of what is happening in our society based around the education systems dating back to the 1800s. They've been completely manipulating our children and our families to depict what they want us to know, right?
Yeah.
They don't want us to know about the atrocities of these different countries and why we shouldn't go to war with Russia or why we shouldn't go to war to some other place. They want you to remain ignorant, much like they'd want us to remain ignorant with the Tartarians and the Romans and all these other civilizations that have gone back in time. Click the general chat, Ben, top left
Oh,
corner.
it would be in the
There it
journal.
is right there.
There it is. Okay. Let me see if it will switch over to that. There it is. Right there.
So this document can be found on the CIA reading room, and it reads how in August of 1944, the Communist Party of Moscow issued a directive to their Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria. And I'll just read through this. It's to liquidate the serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, was to be falsified in order to eliminate references to Great Russian aggressions and hide the fact of the real course of Tartar-Russian relations. This was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians on orders of the Communist Party have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians always appear in a good light. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed so that the present and future generation of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past.
Good lord.
Yeah. It's
That's a pretty heavy text, and it was classified, so it's very telling to me. This was classified by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency in June of 1957, immediately after it was published, and it wasn't declassified until August of 1999. Why would they classify this document? Why would they deny the American people of learning the facts of what communist Russia was doing during World War II, the destruction of this nation's history? Well, I think it's very telling that there was that there was this sort of collaboration between the U.S. and the communists at this time, and I think a lot of that actually goes back to the Moscow Conference of 1941 and our choosing of the lesser of two evils. I'm not saying that this was making a judgment whether it was right or wrong that we allied with the Russians and that we fought against the Germans. I'm just saying that this conflict is a lot more nuanced than contemporary scholars seem to make it out to be. We like to think that we were always the good guys, that we were always doing things the right way, and that we needed to nuke Japan because of these reasons. And maybe we did. I don't know.
Yeah.
There is some evidence that the Navy did intercept a communique, a Japanese communique, months prior to Pearl Harbor, and that communique was essentially saying we are going to attack Pearl Harbor in the next few months, and that was relayed back to the
Yep.
American president, and for whatever reason, no action was done. So
Yeah,
it kind of
I
feeds into
deep
the idea
dived
that there was a
that
lot of
one.
false flags leading into these wars. People talk about, I talk about 9/11. I think a lot of
Oh
that
yeah. Oh yeah.
was absolutely a false flag. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, going back
Mhm.
to JFK, the Joint Chiefs of Staff signing off on the what was that called? That document, Operation Northwoods. Are you familiar with Operation Northwoods?
No,
I've heard of it.
you are
I've
giving me
heard
so
that,
much
but I
data.
have never actually looked into it.
So Operation Northwoods was a military plan signed off by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and presented to President JFK at the time, saying we are going to blow up Cuban jetliners, we are going to kill Cuban friendlies, we are going to kill American citizens as a false flag, as a rationale to invade Cuba. And JFK did not sign off on the plan. He was furious with it, and this kind of feeds into one of the many reasons why they may have taken him out.
Oh yeah, there's a
Wow.
treasure trove of other things because there's a bunch of classified documents that are in the FOIA release, and anyone can look it up on in the Freedom of Information Act in those archives. And now, don't get me wrong, there are some areas you have to kind of read between the lines because there's a lot of heavily redacted lines, but there is a litany of other things that to the public eye and ears that would have given much motivation to eliminate JFK, other than what the public kind of knows about, like with the military industrial complex and the things that he had planned on doing to dismantle all these different things. That was just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more below that that they were not happy about, and they're in
There's the
these
UFO
documents.
stuff too,
Oh yeah, that's a. I'm not gonna open that can of
Roswell
worms right
incident.
now
Yeah.
with because I have a thing that I just told him about
Yeah.
the other day that I actually want to talk to you about because it kind of plays a role into the whole lost civilization narrative, and I think you would be actually a really interesting person to talk to about it. Uh, if we have
Please.
time at the end, I would love to once we get through cover all the Tartarian stuff and just all this stuff.
I'm
I would love to run my theory by you and just see what your perspective is on it because I am obsessed with it now. I'm like 99% leaning towards this is what I firmly actually believe and it's not a theory, which is bad. That means I'm going to start becoming biased, so I'm trying not to let myself go that one extra percent. I got to keep it at 99. Got to leave that 1% room because that will keep me in check. So,
You got me on my edge of my seat now.
okay, I will. I promise. I will run it by you here in a little bit. I just want to
Okay,
make. I don't
sounds
want to
good.
get us too sidetracked. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways,
Well,
go on.
how much longer do you think we got you here? How much
As
longer
long
you
as
got?
we want.
Oh my goodness, are you serious right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, Merry fucking Christmas to me. I am so happy. You have no idea. So, anyways, moving on from that. I already forgot where we were.
Yeah, I mean, we've been
We're talking about World War II, the
Ah.
nuance of wars.
how the Russians were burning the books in the libriaries based around the Tartarian civilization
Yep.
and their texts in the
They
Muslim
also
countries.
outwardly they deported the entire Crimean Tatar population during the end of World War II as well. During 1944, they put them on these unsanitary cattle cars, like 250,000 of them, and shipped them to remote regions of Uzbekistan and other Central Asian republics. And the exile conditions were horrific. It killed over 50% of them, it's estimated. So it's just another addition to the long list of Soviet monstrosities or atrocities that happened during World War II.
I think monstrosity is a proper term as well. There,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
man. This episode, this talk so far has had me saying "wow," and I didn't know that a lot.
He has a lot of Owen
Um,
Wilson moments going. He's
wow.
like, wow, wow. That's pretty much what's going on with him right now. Wow.
I'm like a student over here in the classroom of two much smarter intellects.
I'm not smarter.
which makes me feel
I'm
very
dumb.
good about myself. I gotta say, the I keep going back to the mud flow theory because you have shown several different images of things that have been buried in our own country, and it's not to be remiss that several different religions alone have spoken about different floods and different flows of mud covering up our entire globe, from Judaism to Hinduism, all across the religious spectrum, right? So I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about the mud flow coverage, if you could at all.
Yeah, if you after you whatever you have the input after this, I do have something I want to add about with cataclysmic changes with societies and the loss of civilizations that I feel like may actually somehow play a role in this overall narrative and concept with like Tartaria and things of that nature. So I do want to add that if you have anything else you want to add about the mud floods and things of that nature.
Sure. Yeah, with the mud floods, the last thing I would say is just that, we know about the flood of Noah. This is corroborated not only in the Bible, it's corroborated in the Torah and in the Quran. And in essentially every major religious text has a flood myth. And then we can look at the Arctic ice core samples and we find out that actually we came out of an ice age roughly 15 to 20,000 years ago. So not only do we have all these religious texts talking about how we had a giant flood, but we also have the scientific evidence that's saying, yeah, we came out of an ice age roughly 20,000 years ago. And when we came out of the ice age, when all those ice caps melt, what do you expect to have happen? A giant flood. So I think the flood of Noah is as close to scientific reality as you can get. Now, as for a more recent mud flood, I'm not entirely convinced that exactly happened the way that it played out, but that's not to say that there aren't massive tunnel systems and a bunch of buried buildings everywhere, because there absolutely are. I just don't know if there was a giant global cataclysmic event that buried every single city across America or every single city across Europe that had to be uncovered. That might have been true in some cases. There were absolutely floods. And there were absolutely buildings that were buried and tunnel systems that we aren't aware of beneath our feet and catacombs and all that. But I'm not necessarily convinced that there was another global catastrophe, a global mud flood that happened, 300 or 400 years ago.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I want to note about, last thing I want to note about World War II, and you guys can decide whether you want to cut this section out or not, because it might not be appropriate for YouTube, but I just think it's something that's going to absolutely blow your minds. So I want to just share this particular image in the general chat as well. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not one of these guys who believe, the general pat, no, we fought the wrong enemy. I'm not that. I'm not a Holocaust denier or anything along those lines. But this particular image blew my mind because it is the origins of the German symbol in World War II. It's the origins of the swastika.
Shit. Look at that.
Hold on a
So
second. Give me
here's what that is. And I want to talk about astrology too in a moment, because it ties all into this. Our northern axis has a processional cycle. Are you familiar with the processional cycle?
No, I'm not.
Not ringing a bell.
So, all right, let me share this video. I'm going to share my screen again with you guys for a second.
Okay. Let me get that
because it's
going.
That image
it's going to make a lot more sense.
The Big Dipper spinning like that is wild looking.
This is going to blow your minds. So if we look at this video, if I can actually pull it up here. Okay, here we go. So if you believe we're on a round Earth, which I believe we are, we can look and see that our axis is slightly tilted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So every 25,920 years, our axis goes through a precession, and that means it creates a circle in the sky.
I see that.
So you see how it's creating that circle in the sky there?
Mm-hmm.
So what that's also doing, so it's not only aligning us, this is a little bit complex, but this is a depiction of the sun. It's not only aligning the Earth during the vernal equinox each year with different zodiac signs, but it's also over that 25,920 years, it is aligning our northern axis with different north stars. But there's only one north star that we achieve peak alignment with, or perfect alignment with, and that is the star Polaris, which we're about to achieve peak alignment with in 2100.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it says 21 2000 here. This is a little bit off. It's 2100 AD. So basically, what this picture is showing that I shared with you, you know how the North Star, it doesn't move in the sky relative to the other constellations. The other constellations rotate around it,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So because we have this alignment with our northern axis, this is why they call them the Axis powers during World War II, right? They call them the Axis powers because their symbol, that swastika, is depicting our northern axis aligning with the star Polaris, and then the Big Dipper rotating around that in the four seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Holy
So
cow.
again, Hitler totally hijacked this symbol and made it evil. It was a Hindu symbol prior to this. It had been depicted in many ancient civilizations all over the world. So I want to make that point very clear. Hitler was evil. The Germans and the Nazis did some horrible things. But there's more nuance to this conflict. A lot of this knowledge has been covered up. That symbol, which again was utilized by the Native Americans, the Hindus, that was hijacked and made evil, made taboo. We can never use that symbol ever again. That is what it depicts. It's that northern axis aligning with Polaris and the Big Dipper rotating around it. And I found that completely mind-blowing, and I wanted to share that with you guys today.
Let me blow your mind then, my man, because I got something to add right to what you just showed us. Now,
all right,
buckle up, dude. And this is a fact. This is a fact now at this point because this is actually public information. So, have you ever heard of the Gateway Experience?
Not really.
So, the Gateway Experience was something that was done by the CIA and other agencies off the books. It was a classified project that took place starting in the 50s, going all the way through to the end of the 70s. There, you can actually order a copy of the book. Someone went and the book is called The Gateway Experience, and it is only filled with declassified documents about the Gateway Experience with handwritten notes from the colonels, the generals, the military personnel, and the people that they had doing the experience. The colonel himself did the Gateway Experience to prove its validity to his superiors. So he participated in it as well. And within that, the point of the Gateway Experience was for not just astral projection or for what was the word for it again? Where you remote viewing. Remote viewing's part of it. But the other part is dimension hopping, dimension walking. It's about changing your internal frequency to match these other layers of reality. And everyone was seeing the same thing. I implore you to please go read the book. It will blow your mind.
It's like $5 on Amazon. They'll ship right to your house.
So, and it's all actual declassified documents. You can go and look up the documents individually with their docket number from FOIA. But the thing is that inside there they talk about the torus. And which is what creates our entire reality that we know. Every layer of the dimensions is the torus. And we're basically, if you look at our universe, which is, they say is always ever expanding, according to the torus, it's actually not. So it is expanding, but it's not in this weird way. So the design of the torus, imagine a donut, looking at the donut from its side, and then imagine the donut being an exoskeleton. So instead of seeing the exterior of the donut, you're able to see through it because that's how they draw it, so you can see it. So where the hole is, that's in the center, where the donut hole would be, is where everything is looping around like this, and it's this, donut shaped with all the, the geometrical lines. What you just showed lines exactly with how the torus moves. Everything about it.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
And I had a personal experience, and so. Sorry, before I tangent, I'm not going to let myself tangent into what I was about to say. I'm going to stay on point. So the torus itself, if you look, when you do your research into like the Gateway Experience and then how the torus forms and how it goes, it actually explains how with like black holes and white holes, they talk about white holes being a thing and not just black holes that we know of in the universe. Basically, what it's kind of laying out is that the black hole and the white hole are basically gateway points for going from one point to another, kind of like the whole concept of Event Horizon. You ever seen that movie where he takes the paper, and pulls it in half and pushes the pencil through to show how you can travel that distance? There is that narrative, but the thing is, you're not just popping out on some other side of our universe. You're actually popping out into a completely different universe. And then they talk about it. There's not just one universe, there's many universes. Um, Hence why everyone does the whole multiverse stuff. Like Marvel's doing it, DC's doing it, like all this stuff, right? And that's all fiction for the most part of how they portray it, obviously, superheroes and all that stuff. But in the Gateway experience, it actually talks about this and it explains it. And it talks about how this whole dimension walking to astral projection to remote viewing, there's a lot of detail. So I'm not going to try to regurgitate all that out, but just landing the plane, everything you just showed in that video actually moves along with the tourist, because there are points, if you look into the tourist and you look into the Gateway experience, there are things in there that they line out with astrology and how the earth is rotating and everything, and lining out with these North Star type concepts. And it aligns exactly with that. Everything you just showed is exactly what's in the Gateway experience. And that was done by top ranking officials, people who, the colonel himself, I forgot his name, Colonel something. He did it himself to prove its validity because it creeped him out. He has his own personal notes handwritten in this thing, where he literally talks about how basically he chose to do it because he saw that all the people that they brought, everything from low-ranking grunt military personnel to civilians, into this program. And when they were doing it, he saw that all of them, one, were able to see the same thing. They were able to dimension walk all together in separate rooms. They were not near each other. They never once got to have contact with each other, but they all met each other due to this vibrational frequency they were able to get their bodies to through different forms of meditation and sound waves. And then they were able to all meet inside this different headspace together. And they were able to walk and see these things. And they talked about how there was entities there that you had to be very careful because there was other beings of these other dimensional frequencies. Basically, it's the same concept of, like, for instance, us here on Earth in our dimension, our realm of vibrational operating. Basically, it's the equivalent of if someone were to, match the frequency to be here, they could be standing in the room. We can physically interact with them and touch them. Same concept, only we're doing it somewhere else. And they openly talk about how this is very real and they were able to accomplish it. And it's freaking wild. It's creepy. It's creepy as shit. So,
Well,
yeah.
it actually, that ties into why all the bell towers may have been removed during World War II as well. I mean, there was like a coordinated effort to destroy all these bells. You mentioned resonance frequencies. I actually have a video about Yangon City in Burma, or current day Myanmar. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that one, but it's talking about the pagodas and how there used to be this great bell called the Great Bell of Dhamazeti, a 300-ton bell. Yeah. And I speculate that this bell and the pagodas, and they wear these like headdresses too that had like spires on them too. They look like some type of wireless receiver. And you mentioned sort of like this telepathy, like they could talk in all these different rooms without even interacting with one another. When you look at this city and you look at, you think about a bell possibly matching the resonant frequency of these spires and of the headdresses that these people were wearing, it almost appears as if it was set up to be some sort of telepathic thing. So I think that there is a lot of merit to the idea that these bells were tuned to specific resonant frequencies to bring about some type of telepathy power or some sort of I don't even know. I mean, who knows what this could actually accomplish? But
that just brings me to the whole thing I was talking about way earlier. Whenever you stepped off camera for a moment, and I was talking about these chambers that were in South America. Like that right there, a lot of the conclusions people are coming to is same with like the pyramids, how there is this resonating effect with inside the pyramids, how the way that they were built, architectural wise inside, and how vibrations moved and things like that was very similar to these chambers. But they were much more, they were set up a little bit different. But the thing is that the ultimate thing at the end of it all was the fact that they were able to achieve different vibrational frequencies within these chambers, precisely, like precise frequencies that you could not attain anywhere else or even by yourself. It was like it was like almost as if they were creating a deprivation tank, only not a deprivation tank, obviously, but isolated to one pinpointed function, which is altering the frequencies of anyone who's inside of it. So it's just it all kind of interconnects, and that's lost stuff. You know, like the tunnels and the chambers that I'm referencing. That's no different than the stuff with the pyramids and other places of that nature that were like cut off information wise about. You know, now. And we can't really get anything else because it's not like we're allowed to just go into these pyramids and go investigate these chambers or go into those. It's completely cut off to the public. They won't let anyone in there. In fact, it's guarded by military of different factions. So it's just like, why are they guarding it? Why are they cutting people off? How come you can't go in there? What are you trying to hide? Like,
And why is 90% of Antarctica off limits too? And there's like pictures of potentially pyramids in Antarctica you can find on Google Earth.
yeah.
So I think this idea that the
And
pyramids
World
were
War
made
II,
for
Nazis were in Antarctica as well. There's
yes,
plenty of declassified
Admiral
documents.
Byrd's voyage down to Antarctica post war.
Admiral Byrd's stuff gets a little finicky. I'm not saying
Does,
finicky
yeah.
as if he's lying. It's just more of there's a lot of misinformation about his actual accounts that are
Like that
floating around.
diary wasn't his. Like the
Yeah.
giant hole that they said he came across. There's no actual evidence, but there was an interview that he did when he was on his way back, saying that we found. Like he was talking about how they got like shot up by these like essentially flying saucers, and there was like technology beyond our comprehension. And then he got back to the States, and then he was like immediately shut up. He didn't say anything more about it.
And he was
so
murdered.
that was the suspicious one. But the whole diary stuff where there's a giant hole and it led to some, interglacial city is
Oh yeah.
is BS. But the interview is real.
Oh yeah. And then he also got the moment he started speaking publicly about it when he got back. All of a sudden, he got locked up in a mental institution, and then all of a sudden, he hung himself. And this is documented. This is a fact. He literally hung himself from outside of a third or fourth floor barred window. One, how did it makes no sense? He literally hung himself supposedly from outside the building, from the bars that you can't remove. What? And that's
There's a
documented.
few of those
really?
that happened.
Yeah, it's like,
I think that happened to somebody in JFK's circle too.
Oh yeah. I
I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember there was somebody connected to JFK who got essentially hung himself out of his own window as well.
Yeah, there's 3 people in JFK circle who supposedly hung themselves.
Well,
And it's
since
not even
we're on
supposedly, it's a fact.
Since we're on the UFO
like
talk,
they did.
since we're talking about aliens and UFOs now and the Antarctica mysteries, why don't you share your experience or your thoughts about the UFOs?
Oh, that's a lot to unload. Yeah, no, I'd be totally game to share it. I'm gonna step out and use the restroom real fast. As long as no one else has to take a pee break, I'm just gonna go and I'll let you guys kind of reminisce over what we all just covered or whatnot, or where your headspaces are, and then I'll come back and lay that out.
I think it's time for a good little break, a little 5-minute break to go use the restroom.
I drink a lot of
Yeah,
water.
I could use one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break, huh?
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's take a break because I drank a lot of water and I drink a energy drink and a beer. So I'm ready to leak the lizard. So, okay, we will be right back. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Cool.
Chocolate.
Milk?
Introducing Jell-O Stir and Snack Pudding.
Chocolate.
A whole new way to snack.
Good.
Chocolate.
Don't worry, I'm making you a cup of this new stuff. Stir.
I need a snack. Jell-O pudding. My own cup of rich creaminess.
New Jell-O Stir and Snack. Now you can have pudding 1 cup at a time.
You got any vanilla?
I can do that.
If you can stir, you can snack.
Understand life. Read Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard, the owner's manual for the human mind. For only $5.95, it's a great investment in yourself.
Imagine a world where you could do anything and leave old, inefficient ways of doing business behind. With new ways to find and share information, AT&T can streamline the way you do business, so there's no limit to what you can do.
When I joined Halliburton, I knew I was going to work on some big things. We put out a few fires at work. Once ran into a small challenge of getting some supplies to our troops. We built bridges, schools all over the world. But the biggest thing, serving our troops good old American food. So they'd feel just a little closer to home. Yeah.
Halliburton, proud to serve our troops.
We are back from the break, the pee break. So before I lay out my little theory for you, is there any closing remarks on with Tartaria and things like that? Because I know once I lay this out, I mean, it will kind of by proxy kind of interact in a way. You could connect dots in this level, but this is going into aliens. So
Yeah.
yeah. Is there anything last little comments on anything isolated we've covered?
You talking to me?
I'll
or
just
you
say,
Talking to everybody.
I'll just say, if anybody wants to know the truth about Tartaria, this is the best book for you to read. It's called Russia, or A Complete Historical Account of All the Nations Which Compose That Empire. It was written by William Tooke.
Could you
in
shoot us the
1780.
name of that in our email, the email chain that we have going with each other? Could you email us the title of that, and that way we can?
Yeah, if I haven't already, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna definitely look into that myself and read that.
Big one. I got it completely printed out here from the archives.
Oh,
I don't know if you're
holy
technically allowed to do that, but
Hey, if it's public
I did
online,
it.
you can print anything. That's what I think. Oh, wrong buttons. Yeah, so yeah, if it's online like that, that's fair game. You can print anything. As long as, I think the only thing that it crosses the line where they don't like is if you were to print it out,
strip.
yeah, put it together, and then sell it as 100% profit to yourself. I think that would be.
It is 1780 though, so the copyright should be all gone.
Oh,
you'd
yeah,
think.
absolutely.
snap.
It's all gone.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Let's monopolize on that shit. Capitalism, baby. Let's go. Free market. Let's do this shit. Make some money. Anyways, so let me go ahead and lay out the theory. Okay. So it's going to take a minute to lay this all out, so please bear with me. It all connects. Oh my gosh, I just remembered the mud floods. There was something I wanted to give comments on. But I was just waiting for an appropriate time to interject. I just didn't want to interrupt anybody. So could I throw this out there and see what you think about it first? Just
Please.
because I don't
Yeah.
want to use this opportunity. So one of the things that's been going on, and this has to do with pole shifts, the pole shifts of the Earth and everything. So this actually does kind of play into my alien theory, as well. And hence why it popped in my head earlier and I started to mention it. But when it comes to these cataclysmic events that happen, and like obviously we lost these civilizations, like this kind of weird resets that keep happening, I can't help but wonder, because like right now we're on the cusp of having another pole shift. We're leading up to the next one. It's getting very close. Like our poles have already started shifting to a degree. And it's not like they're shifting, we're watching them shift and, at an insanely fast rate. It's more of, since we're now at that point in the time frame that it typically happens that we know of, we're able to see it in live time, but it's just in a slow process. But we're very close to the end to where the next pole shift really starts going through.
How long is that cycle typically? Between pole
I'm
shifts.
trying to find it right now.
Yeah.
but I will get back to you. in just
Yeah,
a
I'll let
moment.
Evan look that up real quick. But basically, with the mud floods itself, so the whole narrative of like all the continents used to be one landmass narrative, right? And then they all broke apart, and then that's why we have what we have now, and blah blah blah.
It says it's typically 300,000 years, every 300,000 years.
Okay,
Gotcha.
so, and we're coming up on that 300,000 year mark. We're like right there. So it's like we're already seeing weird things happen with our the magnetism of the poles and how it affects everything. We're already seeing it happen since we're right there at the end of it. But I can't help but wonder if there is a cataclysmic event of some form. So, for instance, the poles shifting. If the poles were to shift, and let's say that caused a massive, because that would terraform the Earth in a lot of different ways, or do some form, some type of terraforming, right? So it's going to change the whole architecture of our Earth, depending on how severe the shift was. And it makes me wonder if there was a advanced civilization, let's say Tartaria, right? We don't know necessarily per se how long ago it existed, just because, if you go and, especially our methods of dating things like carbon dating. Well, carbon dating is great, but at the same time, it becomes more and more inaccurate the farther back you go. Because now, like, we're having to use a unit of measure of scale that we're going, oh, it could be between 10,000 to 20,000 years old. Well, that's 10,000 fucking years. That's a long ass time in the perspective of a human being, human life, right? So it's like the farther back you go with carbon dating, the more kind of gappy it gets. There's larger spans of
Yeah,
time.
you can't carbon date stone. You can just carbon date the biological matter that's like on the stone. So you're saying, oh, it's at least this old because we found this organic matter shoved within these two little blocks.
Yep, exactly.
But you're not actually telling, like when they carbon date the pyramids to like 2500 BC, it's not actually, the pyramids are exactly 2500 years old. People think that, oh, that's a definitive answer. No, because you can't carbon date the stone. You're just carbon dating the organic matter that you're finding on the stone. So that sample may be completely inaccurate.
Oh yeah. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that, like, the farther back you go on this carbon dating, well, it becomes more inaccurate. And then it makes everything else inaccurate around it. So with that being said, I just wanted to throw that out there. So on the side of, like, the pole shifting, obviously we had a pole shift 300,000 years ago. Now the question really, comes out of that is, like, how severe was it? And if it was very severe, what were the effects of that, which obviously would cause geographical changes in the earth and every living being on that planet, or our planet at the time. So it just makes me wonder if there was a pole shift, and let's say Tartaria was a thing at that time, which I would bet money it probably was, if we're going off of this narrative of it existing at this time, in the past before all these things, it wouldn't surprise me. Be like, okay, our Tartaria was the thing. Well, if a pole shift happened and a massive cataclysmic event were to happen because of that, and there was this massive terraforming of the earth on a certain level going on, then that would, one, cause structures to get ripped apart across the world, and then due to the continents moving around, things like that, it would reshape everything. So with that being said, that would play into the whole mud flood aspect as well, because if it caused the water to get sloshed everywhere, everything's getting rise and falls everywhere through this terraforming and geological change that happens. Well, that would explain why things were just caked up in mud deep within the earth below our feet in modern times, because everything got just sloshed all over each other. Because, like, the mental picture I put in my head is, imagine taking a tote, like a rectangle shaped tote, right? And you put some dirt in there, put some water in there, and put dirt on one side a little bit higher, and then put water on the other side to where the water is just below the dirt, the level of the dirt. Well, the pole shift would cause everything to get swashed around on a large scale. So now in my head, I pick up that tote and I spin it and I move it around like this, and then I plop it down. Now all of a sudden, the dirt that was isolated away and it was above the water line, now that's all been sloshed over by the water, and the dirt has now been dragged all over the place. And then let's say you put action figures, just like little toys that were on top of the dirt. Well, all of a sudden, after you get done doing that spinning and sloshing around, and that water mixed in with everything, now all of a sudden that mud that it was making deep inside there, and it all settles, well, those action figures are now down at the bottom. I mean, I don't think of another easier analogy to lay out than that, to coincide with the mud floods. Because now all of those action figures would represent structures, civilizations, things like that, things of giant pieces of architecture that are durable. That were
Göbekli Tepe, for example, being buried under, we've only excavated 5% of it. Yep. Jimmy Corsetti's been arguing with all these archaeologists on Twitter who are saying that, we're not going to excavate the whole thing until, 150,000 years from now. We're going to leave that for future generations. Well, why? Why aren't you digging up this or excavating this enormous megalith? The only answer could be, in my mind, that they're trying to cover something up, that there is something that they do not want us to excavate. And just going with what you said, yeah, all those blocks, the T-pillars, are just buried under hundreds and hundreds of feet of earth.
Yeah.
So, and they've done LiDAR scans, and they've concluded there's a ton of that stuff. So I just sent a chart in the general chat here of the ice core samples from the Arctic. Now, these may or not be gospel. These may or may not be completely accurate. But these charts all show that around 25,000 years ago, we had a massive temperature change. We were in an ice age, and then we got pulled out of the ice age very rapidly. So when that happened, that would have caused giant flooding, giant mud floods, for lack of a better term, across the earth. This was the flood of Noah, I believe. The flood of Noah, the flood of Noah in the Quran, in the Bible, in the Torah. It's all over the place in these religious texts, and then we have the scientific evidence to back it. So I think you're on the right track that a lot of this old architecture would have gotten buried. I don't know if all the Greco-Roman style stuff from contemporary America, like all of that was dug out from over 25,000 years ago, but we know that, or I would highly suspect that a lot of the ancient Egyptian stuff was actually there prior to the flood of Noah. This was the true old world civilization prior to the last ice age ending. And when the ice age ended, the temperature rapidly changed, caused giant flooding, killed most of humanity, and then it was reborn again through primarily Noah and his lineage.
Yeah.
So I think that's the story of Noah, and where I would place us being as the closest to the truth in terms of what we can find from these religious texts.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. And the one other little add-in before I move into my alien theory, because it plays a role into this. So one argument could be made that it's like, okay, well, if there was this big slosh, based off my analogy, right, and it caused everything to get buried down, the mud goes over these mud floods that happen, right? Basically, one argument could be made in a way to go against it. Someone could lay out saying that basically, well, if there was all this massive earth change, like, within our crust and our soil and all that stuff, well, how did anything stay intact, right? Well, one good rebuttal to that I would lay out is that, well, look what happens when you see earthquakes happen or tectonic plates shift, right? If something were to crack and there's a one piece out of the break, that happens, and it would be numerous all over the planet, you would see that there are certain areas that didn't just crumble. It stayed intact. It just was a piece that was broken, and it shifted along with everything else, and anything that was inside of that or even like built into it there's a good possibility it would stay intact. It depending on the size of the structure, what it's made out of, and especially some of these old architecture where it's like this mammoth size architecture that's just pure stone or pure whatever it's made out of from that geological region. So it's just like, to sit, anyone who were to give that type of rebuttal, that would be mine right back and saying like, well, we can literally see when things shift and break apart and move. It doesn't mean every 2 inches everything's breaking apart. There could be a 300-mile square area that's one chunk that's broken, getting sloshed around, and depending on what architecture is there and how it was made, there's a good possibility a good chunk of it might survive. Doesn't mean that it would be hospitable for people living there when it's happening. No, the people may die, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what I try to like lay out if that were to be said. And I feel like that makes sense to a degree. If I'm looking at it wrong, I would love to hear.
No, I don't think you are. The Sahara Desert used to be a lush rainforest.
Yes, it did.
So, and the majority of that has not been excavated. So we know about the pyramids. We know about
also it used to be under the ocean too.
What's that?
It used to also be under the ocean too. That's why there's seashells everywhere, and whale skeleton,
skeletons is proper.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. There's also fragments of whales there too.
You can actually see the ripples, like giant ripples that you'd see on the beach with sand and waves coming in throughout the Sahara Desert. So when you look at Egypt and you see all these ancient pyramids and these ancient megaliths there, you got to imagine that there are a bunch of unexplored stuff in other areas in that northern African region as well. There's probably giant megaliths under the sand that we just are not aware of today.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. So, unless you have anything you want to comment, Evan, before I go into the alien thing, because I'm about to lay it out.
Yeah, this is my call to Vladimir Putin. If you have any Tartarian evidence, please release it to the public. I, for one, believe that this is a real thing, real possibility, that Tartaria has been overthrown by the education system around the world since 1800. So please release it to the public. We would love to shut up about this. Let us know about it. We need verification from you. It's on your flag, for crying out loud. Come on.
Come on, bro. Come on, bro.
I would
Get
just
these
add to
players.
that, Tucker Carlson, you were handed a packet of information from Vladimir Putin about, there were letters from, I believe it was Ukraine's king at the time, to the Russian Tsar. Release the information that Putin provided you in that packet. I don't know if you guys watched that interview, but he handed him a packet of information saying,
Yep.
here's the, and Ukraine and Crimea at that time, of those letters being written, which is part of Putin trying to say he's Russia's the legitimate owner of Ukraine. Regardless, the time period of those letters that he was handing Tucker were from a time period where that area was actually more or less ruled by the Tartarians. So I would urge not only Putin, but I'd urge Tucker to release that information that he was handed to the public as well.
Yeah.
Come on, Tucker.
Come on, Tucker. I'm actually a fan of Tucker Carlson now. Ever since he got away from Fox, he's been able to speak freely, more unfiltered, and just say the
I would
truth
agree.
of what he thinks.
Yeah.
And so I've become more and more of a fan of Tucker Carlson over the years.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and
Switching gears.
I'm gonna switch gears on you, so buckle up, man. I'm gonna lay this out. I'm gonna set some foreground, so that way it all makes sense by the time I get done.
Buckle up, everybody.
Well,
buckle
because
up.
if you have never listened to anything about or researched anything about Bob Lazar, the Gateway experience, because they all tie into each other, because vibrational frequencies play a role, the pole shifting plays a role, everything from UFO sightings play a role, especially in modern times. The frequency of it, how often it happens. All of these things interact with each other. So I'm going to try to lay out the groundwork so you're on the same page as me with this. Okay, so I'm going to start. So Bob Lazar, I'm going to start with him and lay this out. So Bob Lazar, in his interviews in the 80s, when he went public, one, to protect his ass, thanks to George Knapp and in his efforts at that time, he laid out, and in one of the interviews, he actually even talks about how there was a stack of documents about that thick that talked about dogma, about religion, that were at the Area S4, which was another base over there in the Area 51 area that we know of as S4 was just a counterpart base that was in the same place, where he got to work on these UFOs and the kind of sphere gravity type engine, whatever it was. But he got to see these documents, and he basically just said, "Hey, I was there for the science. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in any of that stuff. This is just what it said." And he said that we were containers for something, and he didn't know exactly what. He's like, "You can call it a soul. You can call it whatever you want, And that's what Bob Lazar said in these interviews back in the 80s. And he was just like, "You can call it whatever you want." But basically, we were containers, and the whole point, these extraterrestrials were trying to get us to preserve our containers. So there's that. There's one that's the first part. The next part is the vibrational frequencies. So this plays a role because one, in Bob Lazar's description of the crafts, is that they would output this magnetic type field, but it would be counteracting with frequencies, and that's why it was able to, one, basically disappear. You couldn't see it. It would just be like active camouflage, right? That's why visibly it would just, you couldn't see the craft anymore. Even 10 feet in front of you, moment it started, everything was up and running, and they had an American, military personnel in there piloting, because they figured out how to at least interact with it enough to get it operational, but not obviously use it to its full potential. But once they got it all powered up and running, and it was floating, and it would start to ascend, it would then basically go invisible, and it was for two reasons. the different forms of magnetism that was going on along with vibrational frequency and the interaction of it, because it was producing two different forms of both. So there's that. And then that also plays into the gateway experience, because this is all other declassified documents, or they say declassified, but there's some redacted things in there, basically about the whole frequencies and vibrational frequencies, and how you can change your vibrational frequency and be able to now interact and see other objects and entities and things of any nature that would be at that frequency. You would now be in tune with it, and now your senses can now actually soak that in, and you can visit, between visual, audio, the works, right? That would go along with it.
Different dimensions.
Yes. So with that being said, and the pole shifting is another thing, and that I'm going to touch on that as I lay this out, because that is going to come and go. So I'm just trying to make sure I word all this right in the proper order. So I think that when I look back at civilizations, and this is how it plays into like this whole narrative that we all talked about, when it goes and plays into civilizations, I'm now at the theory that over time, we as a species, I think that one, we are being harvested. I don't believe that, and the other thing that one tidbit, and it has to do with the harvesting concept, that needs to be disclosed first, is that one other thing that Balbazar and many other whistleblowers from other areas of UFO and alien disclosure that have happened since the 50s, they all have said, at one point in time, they've all alluded to, or just blatantly said it out loud, that we are basically being, the whole concept of religion and dogma was put in place not by us, but by an external entity. And it was done that way because they wanted us to preserve we needed to be a healthy container, so that way what we were containing, which was like these different vibrational energies and frequencies and electricity that goes on in a certain level inside of our bodies, needed to be on a positive end and not a negative. Because if it's on a negative, it's not something that they can absorb and take and harvest. Hence, the concept of the soul, right? You want to have a good soul, not a bad soul. Hence why dogma was implemented into our lives back in history, because they wanted to preserve what was inside. You can call a soul whatever you want, but for conversation's sake, we're just going to call it a soul.
And didn't Balbazar say this on national television?
Yeah, he said this on national television.
Said he read it from a document from the CIA,
yep.
right?
This is all in that stack of documents that was there at the facility that he was given access to, along with the engine that operated these crafts. So this is, now I'm going to really push into my theory, is that there is no higher power of some omnipotent being. I do not believe that. I don't believe that there's good or bad. I don't even think that there's good aliens or bad aliens. That's all purely subjective. That based off your moral code, how you want to interpret it, that would then change what you consider good or bad. So I think good or bad is purely a man-made construct at this point, for the most part. So with that being said, I think that with the whole concept, I think that they were trying to get us to preserve it because they get that from us, because they themselves have become to this point, because there's also the narrative that everyone talks about in the alien area for the extraterrestrials, that they cannot reproduce. Hence why we have to preserve our containers, because they don't want us, these recessed genetics that play on over years of doing bad things to your body. Well, that goes on to your kids and your kids' kids and your kids' kids. So our containers need to be, over time, it's kind of like a farmer. I use the analogy with him. I look at us, the earth is essentially like a farm. And basically, we're the chickens of that farm. We're not the chickens. We're not like the bulls or the longhorns. I don't believe that. I think we're like chickens to them, because what do chickens do? Well, they poop out eggs, and then you eat those eggs. You take those eggs for whatever you need. For us, it would be for sustenance, for nutrition, blah, blah, blah. For them, it could represent something completely different, which would be, the positive energy or whatever, concept that really entails in there, or your soul, however you want to label it. They take that because we produce it within ourselves, something they cannot do anymore, supposedly. So But the thing is that chickens, if you look at any farm, you're allowed to like, for instance, I grew up with chickens. We used to let them wander everywhere. We didn't care. As long as they didn't get into the road, that was the only time we stopped them. But anytime there was the fence line, we let them go over the fence. Who cares? They're eating and, eating the insects, all that stuff. They come back as long as they didn't go to the road and get run over by a car. We didn't care. Well, same narrative. Look at us leaving the Earth and going into space and launching satellites. That's no different than a chicken going outside of the pen. There's no difference. You're letting the chicken outside of the pen, and the pen, the chicken's able to wander around. But the moment we try to go too far, all of a sudden we just can't. We just can't do that, right? We also technologically have not gotten to that point where we can go that far, besides throwing things out there that are, unmanned. But that,
So who are these watchers?
I have no idea. I think what it is that it sounds to me like we are just on a farm. And I think that what they're doing is that the reason why we're seeing so many UFOs now, I don't believe it's because, there's so many little green men everywhere. I think it's a mixture of both. I think most of what we see in the sky right now are man-made, reverse engineered craft. From what because we've been doing this since before Roswell. This, the first alien craft ever recovered from a downed craft was actually before Roswell. It was at the end of the 20s, like going into the 30s. We recovered a alien craft, and Dr. Stephen Greer talks about it, like all this stuff. Many other people have who got access to things. But going on from that, we recovered, we've had basically 100 years to tinker with these supposed extraterrestrial craft. In 100 years, even if you're not able to recreate the craft to the exact same specifications, the materials, the works, the difference is that we are able to take aspects of it, and all of a sudden, look, we figured out how to replicate this part of the technology. We were able to replicate this part. So after every decade going on for 100 years, they're able to basically walk away with all these different things that they were able to replicate and reverse engineer, out of chunks of it. And then that's what we have now. You're seeing all these people or all these UFOs in the sky, UAPs, whatever you want to call them. I think that a good chunk of them are operated by us. I don't even think it's aliens for the most part. However, I do believe that there are more alien sightings going on. For instance, the jellyfish UFO, where people have used technology to refix the image, and you see a little green guy on top, like he's operating like a little crane thing as he's flying around. Have you seen that? It's absolutely wild. And it's not fabricated.
Yeah.
It's not even fabricated.
Yeah, the video. Yeah. Is it the video where they zoom into the cockpit and he's like, they see like the little gray alien head up there?
Like turning his head. Yeah. And that thing is, that what they did with that, I think it was Jeremy Corbell. They came out and said that when that stuff started floating around here recently, that was the original footage that they got to see of that. It was clear as day. It wasn't pixelated what's out in the public sphere right now. He was just able to view the video, the original copies. And then it was clear as day. It was a person, a little alien in there with big black eyes, and or in the video, it's black eyes, but who knows what color that really was. But the thing is that we're able to see that now. Well, my thing is that we're approaching a pole shift, and it's already starting to take effect, and that affects our frequencies and how we interact with everything around us. I am inclined to believe now at this point that the reason why we're seeing more and more alien or extraterrestrial things is because since the poles are starting to shift and it's starting that process, and we're almost there at the cusp of that 300,000 year-ish mark, it's now changing our frequencies, which is like dropping the veil. So we're able to see them in moments, but not fully interact unless they're intentionally wanting us to, because they can change the frequencies of whatever they want with their crafts. So it's just like on that aspect with the pole shift, I think that where that plays in is really, it's affecting the veil to where we're able to see beings of another dimension, another vibrational frequency, but just not fully. It's kind of like getting a mirage of them, like kind of like a transparent for a moment, and then it's gone. And with that being said,
why is the pole shift? Why is the pole shift affecting our ability to see these beings?
It affects the vibrational frequency of the Earth. The Earth has its own
Interesting.
vibrational
Okay.
frequency, and this is a fact. The Earth has its own vibrational frequency. That's why the pyramids were such a big deal and a big thing of conspiracy, because the pyramids' vibrational frequency is aligned exactly with the Earth inside these chambers.
Yes, that's why it's speculated that's actually utilizing harmonic resonance. It was also right next to a river, the Nile River, right?
Yep. And
Utilizing the flow of the water.
Yep.
And that aquifers feeding, or the subterranean shafts are feeding into aquifers.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was that it was utilizing the natural resonant frequency of the Earth.
Yep. And so with everything being changed, with the poles shifting, it's changing the frequency now. Like, we don't vibrate with the Earth 100%. We have our own independent frequencies each. That's why some people see things more often than other people. I think it's literally because your internal vibrational frequency is, since everybody's is different, I think that they're just more closer aligned in that moment, or maybe just naturally more in line with that other frequency or closer to it. And then they're able to see it more.
Pineal gland.
I'm not really sure. I really don't know
Mhm.
on when it comes into different things, because opening up the whole concept of the human brain and vibrational frequencies, like on the scientific and medical level, like, or within neurology, that's a whole can of worms. Which I'm so game to go into any time. I just know if I open it up right now, I'm going to be talking for another hour just about the brain, because I'm obsessed with it. But where I was so with the poles shifting, it's changing the vibrational frequency of things. And I think that it's kind of dropping a veil where we're able to see this interaction. Because, for instance, going to play into the whole farm aspect, and we're, and they're basically like, that analogy. The original jellyfish UFO came out of Turkey a long time ago, like 20 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer. And in that video, it's not the greatest video, but when you watch it and they zoom in, it's the jellyfish style craft, just like the recent ones that have come out. And one thing that's been the same narrative across all of them is that you see it, obviously, if it's this little alien guy on top of this crane thing, kind of reminds me of like a probe, like a tester. So like because in the Turkey video that came out over 20 years ago, you see it going across the landscapes and stopping and sending out, like, you see things kind of drop down and pull stuff back up from the earth, like natural things, not abducting a person or a cow. But it reminds me of like when a farmer goes out to his garden and is checking his crops, and he's just like, oh, look, there's a lot of weeds over here. Let me pull these weeds out, whatever. Or, hey, let's test the soil. How good is the soil for putting in this particular type of crop? That's what it looks like to me. So with that being said, it's just like it plays into this even more just from the things I've been able to see and research and read about. And now here's where I'm going to really take it up a notch. And I'm sorry this is taking forever to lay it out, but there's a lot of things that interact, but it's all from sources that all connect into each other, that are prominent and verified, from people actually talking about it to release documents or release videos, and things of that nature. So I'm sorry it's taken so long to get this out.
No, it's fine. I'm enjoying it.
I'm just trying to paint
Very
the picture
thoroughly.
proper. I'm trying to paint it proper. So where this comes into play with basically the whole idea of like people look at them as good or bad. I think what it is, or no, not good or bad, sorry. The whole cataclysm stuff, like resets. I'm starting to think that when, for instance, if I was a farmer and my chickens became self-aware of everything around them, and they knew that I took their eggs from them, and they had a conscious level to where they're like, hey, they're taking our eggs and we can't make little baby chickens, all that stuff. Well, they would try to peck the shit out of me anytime I came near, right? If they were on that, level of consciousness. Well, it's no different than us. The more we become aware, the more we, like, for instance, if it ends up being divulged, let's say hypothetically it was divulged that these things were coming here to harvest us, to take things from us, to where they could reproduce, do all these different things that they're needing on their side of things. Well, we wouldn't like that. And we knew, because at that point we know they're not a omnipotent being that's all good. It's like, no, they're fucking taking us. They're harvesting us. They're taking, we're slaves to them in a sense. We're a resource. So no, we would uprise. We would say, no, look at everything in history. Anytime the slaves finally opened their eyes and band together, they overthrew and revolted. Saying that narrative plays a role. And I think that plays a role into all of this now, because basically the more aware we become, I think in history, there have been civilizations that have become aware, and we did start to revolt. And then all of a sudden, boom, that civilization just gets wiped out. And all of a sudden there's a reset, and we have all this lost technology, and we have all this lost things that we know nothing about. All of a sudden it's gone, And so that's one aspect of it. And that's where my head starts to go, because it's like, oh, the more we become aware, and the more we can't just be basically put into an assembly line of, people stop believing in religion, people stop doing this, whatever. Well, it's getting away from the construct that they put in place, if that was a real thing, like if that's really what they were doing. So with that being said, I really think that at this point, what my theory, to really land it down, is that what we're really seeing at this point is that there is a vibrational change, and it's dropping the veil to where we're able to see them more often, but not fully interact completely just from a viewpoint. I think that that's why regular people are seeing things randomly blip. I personally saw a UFO. He saw one.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a sphere floating in front of me in traffic with other people. And then I talked about this on another episode. I got to see it. It looked like the size of two minivans put together, this silver sphere, as if it had an axis on it that was always moving. So it didn't just spin in one direction. It was as if it was doing this the whole time. And all of a sudden, literally,
way.
Oh yeah, I saw it in person. It was maybe 200 yards in the air. And, when I saw this thing, by the time I got my phone out, because I was trying to watch it while grabbing my phone, because I was in my truck, and I'm looking at it, and I pull my phone up. The moment I'm starting to get my phone up, I literally blinked, and it was gone. Literally blinked, just a quick blink on my eyes. It was gone. The guy next to me in traffic, I just looked over him because we were parked next to each other, and he was just like, like looking at me, like going like, like, did you see that? And I was like, yeah, I fucking saw it. Like, and then that was it. And then later on, I looked up UFO sightings in North Texas, and there was hundreds of accounts that morning of a sphere-shaped craft all over North Texas, all over, just blipping out of existence. So I really think at this point that my theory is that overall is that we're at the cusp of a change where we're actually able to see these things more often. The veil's dropping. And I'm starting to think that anytime that we become too aware of what's going on as a species, all of a sudden there's a reset. Some kind of cataclysmic event happens. Sounds like a farmer going through and resetting his whole fucking field. And goes, shit, they can't be aware of that. Let's reset these motherfuckers. Let's separate them from the other ones. Let's cut it down and start over. That's what it sounds like to me. I hate hearing like Billy Carlson talk about like the Anunnaki and crap, because he talks as if it's a fucking fact about everything, and he spews out all this jargon and bullshit that it's from deciphered text. That, bitch, you don't know that language. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then just hearing him talk hours on end, it's like, wow, you have more information than every part of the internet that exists. You're full of shit. What, are you just pulling this magical shit out of your ass? Like, and he talks about how they're omnipotent, beautiful beings that love us. It's like, are you retarded? Like, I can't help but ask that question, because it's like the bias is so hard. It's not even funny, but it's just like, there's people like that out there talking about this stuff. And I'm not saying I'm right. This is just my theory, right? But I'm going off of what I can see and I can actually read about, and from accounts that are verified. That's the only thing I really can do. So at this point, I've come to the conclusion that I really think that these resets that happen, or these events that take place where civilizations just get cut down. And I'm not saying every civilization that falls and gets lost is due to this. I'm saying that I think that it has happened. And I think with us getting to another, this pole shift that's happening, and it's changing the vibrational frequency of things, and it's like dropping this veil where you can actually start to see these. Like everyone's being able to start to see it now for the most part. Well, that tells me that something might happen here soon. Like, as in, there's going to be some other event that takes place that wipes the board clean.
And welcome to the end of Ben's 10-minute alien rant session.
I know, man. It's so much to get out because it's a weird, it's a very layered theory, but it is all built upon things that I can verify. So, like the video evidence of the original stuff we're seeing from over 20 years ago, to Bob Lazar's accounts, which the reason why Bob Lazar I hold as a credible source is that everything that he said was going on and happened has been proven true over the past 30 years.
That's right.
He talks about element 115. They discovered element 115. The Russians did. It just didn't make a. They just didn't have a stable form of it. But they were able to then all of a sudden create it later on, and they're like, "Oh shit, this is a real element."
So
like,
I thought with
so it's,
all of that said, what are the implications that you are sort of laying out?
Honestly, at this point, it's in a weird way, it's open-ended, mainly because one, it's a theory, but then two, even my theory that I've come up with doesn't have all the answers. For instance, like if we're being harvested, right? There's a lot of things that are unknowns. Okay, why are you trying to harvest a positive energy and not a negative energy? Why are you trying to, or a soul, right? If that's a real thing, why is that needed? But then also you can't reproduce. But one thing that plays into that, thank you for asking me that because it just made me remember it. So one of the other things, and this goes into like alien human hybrids, and people have talked about that a long time. There's been people who have come forward who, testimonies of military personnel who then also died after going public and talking about it. And that's a fact. Everyone can look it up. Any listener can look that up. Where there have been military personnel who have come out and talked about these alien human hybrids that have gotten like basically what they use our souls or the energy form for is when they take from women who were abducted, because there was a huge slew of cases where women were abducted throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, hell, even going into the 90s before it got like dumbed down and people didn't report it as much, or the mainstream didn't, where these women who were abducted were talking about how they were impregnated. And it was like a super fast pregnancy. Like they were like, and the reason why we say super fast is because their recollection of time while they're gone and abducted is only like a week or maybe 2 weeks. Or sometimes it's like 6 months, but then all of a sudden they've only been gone for 24 hours. And I think that has to do with being moved between one dimension to another. You're in a different form of frequency. You're in a different form of existence on another plane. So I feel like, because time is not one strand moving in one straight line. It's like the torus. It's this constant rotating type geometrical shape that's happening in it, and the torus makes up everything. Even on a small microscopic scale, you can see the torus at play, even on a microscopic scale. So it's pretty wild. So that just tells me that time is relevant, right? So it's just like if you are at one point over here, kind of like Interstellar, they were on that one. I don't know if you've ever seen Interstellar or not, but it's like the concept when they're on that water planet. They're only there for a couple hours, but it had been 24 or 30 years for the guy up in the atmosphere or up and orbiting the planet. Due to relativity, that's why there was this massive difference. So that's what it tells me, is like that would play a role into this of giving an explanation why there's this loss of time for these individuals who are abducted, and they experience a longer form of time, whatever. But playing into the whole alien human hybrid type stuff, it's like where that really makes any sense, it would be if they're abducting these women, they're taking this stuff so they can reproduce. Well, they just made a hybrid of an alien and a human. Well, aliens are different from us, and if they're not able to reproduce and produce like this positive energy or this neural circuitry that goes on in the brain, well, they would have to pull that from us, which would be the positive vibrational frequencies, or the soul, you could say, and implement it into these new vessels that they created that were of the hybrid between the two. That would make the most sense to me if I could give an explanation. That's the only thing I could think of. But like I said, this is all bullshit. This is me talking on my ass, just trying to connect dots with the alien human hybrid stuff. But I think I'm at the point where I do not believe aliens are good. I don't think they're good or bad. I think it's just a on a larger scale farming. That's all it is. Just from everything I've been able to pull, which a lot of people don't want to hear that because no one wants to hear that their God's not real in the way that they see it. No one wants to, think of the idea that they're stuck inside of an aquarium where they're constricted. No one likes to think of that idea and the long-term implications of what your role is in the universe. There's I could see why a lot of people would not be a fan of even entertaining that idea. But my theory, all of this just really comes from what I've been reading and listening to. I listen to everything. I listen even to the stupid stuff that does not even make any sense whatsoever, and there's nothing to back it up. It's just someone talking, spewing out just a fictional story. So it's just like, between all of it pulled together, it's a loaded sandwich, and it's really hard to share this theory with people without having to just lay it out the way I did. Because if you don't have the context of where these things are coming from or why I came to those conclusions, well, then it just gets chalked up as you're just talking out of your ass for fun. Like, you're just making up a fictional sci-fi graphic novel for a comic book or something. I'm not trying to do that. I'm literally just going off of what we know as actual evidence at this point, and even some circumstantial evidence, just because you have to dive into that a little bit, or you have to pull from it slightly, especially the alien human hybrid stuff. So with that being said,
Well,
yeah, that's pretty much my theory at this point. Is it's really hard to explain it.
so I will say that the one thing I will say about like the Billy Carlson, Zachariah Sitchin, Anunnaki stuff is that there are some evidence you touched on the alien human hybrid stuff. There is some evidence from those ancient Sumerian texts that humans were seeded on this planet from the lower primates of Earth by these greater beings. And it sort of makes sense to me. It explains why we're so much different from everything else that we see on this planet, every other life form. And then also going off that, there's some evidence about the reason why we're so obsessed with gold as a material. There's nothing really too special about it, but the idea that we were here to farm gold for the aliens. So that's kind of like an alternate theory based on like what you laid out. You talked about the containers and being kind of containers of frequency that were being harvested. I mean, it's also possible that they were just using us to harvest kind of as almost like a lower caste or like a slave race of themselves.
Gold is
intelligent enough to, what's that?
We produce gold naturally out of our bodies.
Do we really?
Yes, in our hair. It's literally in our hair. Gingers, if you're a ginger, you got a gold mine on you, buddy. Yeah, gingers produce the most gold in their hair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no kidding.
Gold.
Okay, I didn't know that.
It's very fractional.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fractional. It's not like, oh, look at this gold nugget I just pulled out of my braid. Nothing like that. It's very small. And I just want to clarify one thing. I know I talk shit on Billy Carlson, and I still am firm on my position with him. However, I will say, when it comes to Anunnaki and like the harvest of gold, there are things that in that fundamental layout that I do know that it's like, okay, yeah, no, that's verifiable, all that stuff. I'm not disagreeing with that. Where I disagree with Billy Carlson is really when he goes onto this in-depth stuff that there's nothing to back it up. There's nothing to back it up, like at all. It doesn't even exist in the ether. It's like, okay, where are you pulling this from? Are you just trying to connect dots and then say, oh, well, this would make the most sense? But he doesn't do that. He ends up saying he's like, no, and we know for a fact that this and that. And it's like, there's no documentation of that anywhere. Like, where is it coming from? That's where my problem with him comes into play, because it's like you're deciding to take a theory of, something that's obviously a theory and label it as a fact. And we know from these documents and these texts, but yet the texts and documents, not once in the public sphere can you find evidence of what he's talking about. That's my problem.
He talks about the civilization on Mars, and I'm like, and he says, oh, it's in the Enuma Elish. And I'm looking through the Enuma Elish for like an hour and a half, and I can't find any evidence of there being a advanced civilization on Mars. Maybe I'm not interpreting the textual evidence correctly, but that's I guess kind of going off what you're saying. An example of that.
Yeah, that is a perfect example. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. He'll talk about things like that, but then when you go and look at the same things he supposedly pulled it from, it's not there. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about, bro. Like, that's
With
where my
that being
problem is.
said, there is some pictures from the Mars rover, from supposedly the Mars rover, that do make me question if there wasn't a civilization on Mars prior. And we know that based on the latest scientific evidence, if however much credit you want to give that the planets are moving further and further away from the sun. So you logically conclude that Mars at one point was more within the sun's habitable zone than it is today.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to the observation lounges episode about the deep dive of the civilizations on Mars and the separation of the planets.
Yeah, no one listens to us. We're like no one listens to us. So like,
yeah, they do.
We get red listed a lot or blacklisted on YouTube a lot. Mainly because we talk about secrets. Like MK Ultra, we did a huge deep dive on that, and the one we did on DARPA,
fringe topics.
Yeah, the one we did on DARPA, which was public information from them. YouTube labeled us as misinformation, but we were reading what was public online from their website, just about stuff that they do, and that whole episode got removed the moment we uploaded it. It didn't even get to go public.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, they pulled it. It's because
that is wild.
We talked about vaccines in it, and I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want the YouTube algorithm to hear me say anything from that conversation. But we talked about vaccines in it because there was stuff that DARPA had released publicly on their website and everything about vaccines and stuff like that, and we were talking about it, and we got labeled for misinformation about vaccines, misinformation of medical science, misinformation on there's like 6 things it slapped us with. And
did you even put in the title or description box or anything, or is it just you talking about it?
It was just us.
Because sometimes that's why. Because I've talked about the Masons before, and they'll like flag my video or like put the little like disclaimer below, like here's a Wikipedia article on the Freemasons, and I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't have put that in the title.
Oh yeah,
but
their algorithm. So my background is I work in IT, right? And
me too, actually.
Oh hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, networking. Yeah.
Oh nice. Yeah. I run the IT department at my job. I'm the head honcho. I don't say the name of my job because I don't want it somehow getting connected, and then they're like, "Hey, you can't do that podcast anymore." Which eventually it will get there if we keep growing the way we have been.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on from that. So. I just drew a blank.
Boys, we have been going for 3 hours.
Don't you pussy out on me now.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Have you guys, because I started this whole channel when I was making Star Trek shorts.
Nice.
So I was making, and Star Trek The Next Generation in particular. Have you guys watched that series?
Yes, I love Next Generation.
Have you watched the episode Edo? The episode on the Edo. It's in the first season. Where it's the planet where there's a spaceship rotating around that's orbiting the Edo planet.
Yep.
So that I did a video. This was a while ago. I ended up removing it because there's a bunch of YouTube stuff. I won't go into it, but it's essentially a metaphor for the hollow moon theory. Have you guys ever looked into the hollow moon theory?
Most definitely we have.
Yes.
The moon being an artificial structure that's kind of an alien spaceship that's rotating and watching us. The episode's called "Who Watches the Watchers."
Yeah,
it's a great episode.
Oh yeah.
You know what? No, that's a different one. Man, there's so much hidden symbolism in that show. I love that show. I can't speak good enough about it. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the hollow moon theory and guess how it ties into your hypothesis.
Well, I never threw it into my theory, the one that I just laid out that took like 10 years to say it. I wasn't laying it out for like with the moon theory, but I do have my thoughts on the hollow moon theory, like heavily, mainly because there's evidence to support on a scientific level, due to some of the Apollo missions that it is hollow. And that was because they did that probe that went around.
Moon rang like a bell.
Rang like a fucking bell. So there's that, and that's documented. So that right there is a huge.
And there's Carl Wolf who got killed because he saw buildings and structures on there, and he was whistleblowing about it. And they killed him.
Carl Wolf was the director of the Air Force back in the 70s, right? Yeah, it was the 70s, and he got to see unfiltered, undoctored photographs from NASA and all that stuff, and he got to see structures, like literal structures. It wasn't like oh, like the pictures we see where people now throw stuff up there to go, oh, look, you can this kind of looks like a structure. No, these are clear as day, apparently. Obviously structures with precise detail, lights, the works on the dark side of the moon that we never get to fully see.
We gotta we gotta do a whole another episode with you here about this whole stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah, we're
basically,
tidally locked, so we only ever see one side. The moon is the number one evidence, in my opinion, of intelligent design in our solar system because it's the perfect size to create solar eclipses, perfect density to stabilize our rotation on its axis. It's tidally locked with Earth, so we only ever see one side. It is wild. In addition to everything I was talking about with the processional cycle before and our alignment with Polaris and the other constellations in the zodiac, I mean,
yeah.
The moon is a really weird one.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And here you go, buddy. So basically, the with the hollow Earth though, and I had to explain this to someone, a buddy of mine, because he was trying to say that how come we never see the dark side of the moon and blah blah blah, and he was trying to say that like basically he's playing into the whole theory that the whole construct of seeing the moon is like fake kind of thing. And I had to lay it out to him. I said, no, that's not what you're seeing, and you're perceiving on this is wildly inaccurate. I said, the moon is rotating, but it's rotating with us. And it's rotating independently, but in synchronization with us. So as it spins around, it's also spinning with us like this. So they're both going like this with each other. I was like, that's why we only see one side. We have proof that that's what it does. And I explain it to him. And once I laid it out and I like pulled up all these graphs and then, all this stuff, he now believes that as well. But leading up to that, he didn't. He was just like, oh, blah, 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 and like had this weird conspiracy theory that made no sense and made him sound like a quack. And I was just like, listen, I'm all for sounding like a quack. I sound like a quack half time myself, but you got to have it rooted in something that makes sense. There's some type of platform or footing to stand on. And I had to explain how the moon is rotating, but we're rotating in full synchronization with it. So that's why we only see the same side every single time as it rotates around us, because we're also spinning. Like we're spinning, it's spinning. That's why I only see one side. But to play into the whole hollow moon concept, there is released documents, or not documents, video that you can see that people have personally uploaded and sent to the UFO sighting archives that's public now, where people can go online and upload videos that they've seen. Like for example, I have an iPhone 15 Pro Max. I can zoom in on the moon in daytime and actually see detail. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some pixelation, but it's wildly detailed. So with that being said, the cameras that some of these people are using are not from a phone. They're using an actual camera that's on a tripod, and they zoom in on the moon, and there's video, and this is authentic video, of showing little silver dots all of a sudden go inside of the moon, and people have analyzed these videos, and they're like, oh yeah, it's never been this is an authentic video, it's never been tampered with, this isn't generated. There's been like dozens of those just over the past couple of years that have been posted online to this website, and which is for reporting UFOs and UAPs. And the weird thing is, they even like they don't, the public, obviously the mainstream media does not report this at all. And the only thing that mainstream media has been truly reporting recently in public eye has been the congressional hearings with like David Grush and a few, a handful of other people on this subject recently in the past couple, like year and a half, 2 years. But that's a real thing. I'm inclined to think that there's obviously something, like there's too much evidence to suggest and documentation to suggest that it's just a fucking rock. Obviously it's not, if it's ringing like a damn bell, and that was documented in the 60s or 50s. And then all of a sudden now you got also video that, has already been analyzed by like thousands, maybe even millions of people at this point, and all go, yeah, it's not doctored. It's never been, that's an original video, and it's obviously not generated. They run all these different tools on it. So it's like, I'm inclined to think that the moon may be actually hollow and maybe a base.
An artificial structure.
Yeah.
It's brought here by aliens.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. I got told to go watch that movie. I think it was called Moonfall or something. No, not Moonfall. There's a movie that came out a couple years ago, or the past 2 years, where it's got the whole narrative is about there's like some type of thing happening with the moon, and there's like this entity, like this alien entity that's happening, And I got told to watch it because I had just got done doing an episode with a couple of friends about the whole alien talk and UFOs. That was the whole episode, and he was like, "Oh, you should go watch it. It's amazing." Dog shit movie, by the way. I watched it. Horrible movie. But the whole reason he wanted me to watch it is because at the end of it, you find out, spoilers. It's been out for a few years, so if I spoil it for anyone, that's on you. Basically, the moon ends up being a machine, and it was made by our ancestors that seeded the planet, and it was us. Like, we're the ones who created us because we went extinct because we created AI. The AI ran rampant, all this stuff. So that part is silliness. But the point of the movie is at the end is that it shows that it's a machine, and it's like they go inside of it and like all this stuff. So I don't know. I'm inclined to start to think that the moon is actually hollow based off the evidence that, things that have come to light that you just can't ignore. If it rings like a bell, there's only one way it can ring like a bell to our knowledge. Got to be hollow.
Yeah, it's got to have large hollow pockets in it.
Yeah.
100%.
So it's just to kind of bring us back down a little bit. With the whole narrative of like aliens and everything like that, my theory in general, like I said, it's my theory that just from connecting dots, not saying that I got it right. There's a lot of open-ended stuff because there's so much stuff that we don't know that would change how my theory would even really be authentic at this point, like, because there's so much unknown that we don't have information to, since they don't want to go public with anything and let anyone actually know the real details of all these classified things that are being talked about behind closed doors. That it's just like, for all I know, I could have just uncovered one piece out of a 10,000 piece puzzle, and I was able to clean off one piece to where it's not dirty anymore, and you can see one little fragment out of 10,000 pieces, and we don't have access to the other 9,999 pieces. That's very real.
That's the big thing here, is that people like to perceive history as this like static record, right? Like it's this never changing thing. Really, it's more of a dynamic thread. I mean, we need to be open to reinterpretation and to change as more information comes to light, because like you said, we don't have all the pieces. We're just trying to discover the pieces. So if you are in this camp where you can only see black or white, or red versus blue, if you're so stuck in this tunnel vision, in this one way of thinking, as more information comes to you, you just kind of cast it off like it doesn't matter. No, we need to be able to adjust our perception of history as more information comes to light, as we discover more of these texts, and not be so stuck in belief.
Without a doubt.
Hey guys, I think I actually gotta wrap this up here. I got a few things I gotta take care of here in a few minutes. Is there anything else you guys want to go over?
No, not necessarily. Thank you so very much for your time. It's been a marathon of an episode here, so thank you so much for sticking around with us. Yeah, you have a vast of knowledge. Well, if you're willing to come back, we'd love to have you back.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man, dude, anytime. Honestly, this was a blast. It's fun, really fun talking with you guys. I definitely do it again.
Oh yeah, I was about to. That was about what I was. I was like, what are the chances that we could get set in stone in the next like week or two, like to do an episode about basically aliens and theories, because there's so much out there, and when we talk to people about this stuff, half the time I've had people on, and we've had people on to talk about it. It's all from people who did not do their due diligence. So we ends up just being this big speculation of what ifs everywhere, instead of actually talking from a source of something.
Yeah, we'll send over some emails for you, so could get some things rolling.
Yeah. I really want to have another conversation with you. I was very nervous leading up to this. Wildly nervous, mainly because I felt like I did not know a whole lot. But then the more we started talking about it, I was just like, oh shit, I kind of know a little bit about this. Oh hey, I'm familiar kind of with this too.
All right. Well,
no, this was great, guys. Yeah, fire me off an email. We'll set something up for sure.
Yeah, we've taken enough of your time. You have a good day. Later.
Yeah, man. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, you guys have a great one. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Right. Yep. And that was our cool interview with him. He is awesome.
He really is.
I know at the end there we went into aliens, but I mean, it's still a fascinating topic. Ignoring the alien part, because obviously that's its own entity on its own. Just the whole Tartarian civilization and where that comes from is it's one, just fascinating, but then two, I really think people need to start like having more open-mindedness about this stuff.
And perhaps a more like willingness to learn a fringe topic. The fact that the Tartarian dragon is on the Russian sigil being slain by Saint Michael is benign to think that anything other could have been.
Yeah.
To think that they never existed, and Vladimir Putin is blatantly putting it out there to be seen. But if you have made it this far, thank you very much, and thank you for sticking with us. And make sure you like, subscribe, and follow along with everything. And please make sure you check out the Observation Lounge on YouTube and every platform.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Please, we'll make sure to tag him in this.
Oh yeah,
in our upload. For all you Spotify listeners or Apple Podcast listeners, I'm not 100% sure if he's on Apple or not, but we are going to provide the links in every single platform that we have. So please go check his stuff out, because he's not just like, coming up with his own theories all the time. Nothing like that. He's going off of actual research. Yeah. He's digging in, trying to find actual evidence of this stuff, and then he provides it. And then he talks about it. Now, he does ask questions, theoretical questions, things of that nature, but he doesn't ever just like go out and go, oh, this is it. This is the conspiracy theory. No, he's not doing that. He's just going off of what's public and what he can actually dig into and unearth and flesh out. And these are just things that he's like, hey, we should ask questions about this. This is something that needs to be looked at.
And if you have any more questions, send us an email at smartlyuneducated@gmail.com.
It is a real email.
And get an answer for you and get back to you ASAP. So
yeah,
again,
it is a real email. smartlyuneducated@gmail.com is 100% a real email.
Thank you for joining us. Y'all have a wonderful day. Adios.
Yeah.
Or night.
It's like we gotta go.
Or bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys. Have a good one. Bye.